你去越南了吗？还是
但是我去了一个巧克力展销会。
哦，谢谢谢谢。
live
What do you see?
I only do it for things. You and I think it's the Marxists. Yeah. Well, that's good. So this is, I can only do the title. Can't do the trees. That's actually. It's the.
Yes. So, I think it's not good.
Yeah, so, yes. Have to have one another power. It's the ball from the. Power muscle. Yeah. For these finding problems.
We don't know some of the time. But don't know, we'll then tell us something. Look at the one piece that things I need to do that, but I was going to that's what we say, I was not. And we are, well, I don't know, we have, we should get some of the. Well, that people really, say, I know, when I think I guess it was. I think it was, it's not where we are.
So you had this thing like that, but I don't know if this is actually the piece, especially here. I have probably that much. He might make that. I think you're really quite solid. I'm still going all over. So I did it. I didn't leave, but I mean, so happy. So I'll see. Yeah, exactly. So
You'll never know that.
yeah, you say I'll go to that. So I'm always this. Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry. It's very cool. Yeah, it is fun. I think it's great from that both. Yeah, they're just like I'm not sure. This time for yes, sir. But this one, yes. This is about obviously, yeah. The age of acting for it's going to give you a little bit. Yeah. Misleading. Yeah. I'm sorry. Because it has to decide looking and draw because one of the struggle. Not that. It has that. Oh, yeah, you have to here and sitting on your toes. Yes. Yeah. I'm ready. I mean. That's basically yes. Right. Yes, so we can see a lot of people on the. How do you go? Apologies. Good start. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Yeah.
You say you were very.
Yeah.
May.
Yeah. Yeah. Wearing like a blue shirt and we can maybe something. Crazy.
Testing, testing.
All right. So, how about we go ahead and get started? So we're starting about 5 minutes late. That shouldn't be a problem. Okay, so welcome everyone to day 2 of our conference on Totality and Contradiction in Kyoto School. So it's my pleasure today to introduce Dennis Prooi, Dr. Dennis Prooi. He's a lecturer at Hong Kong Baptist University, so not here at CUHK, but just down the road. He graduated from Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, also down the road. Okay, so become a proper Hong Konger here. And he has expertise in modern Japanese philosophy, but he also has a strong background in German idealism and some French philosophy as well. Well, it's been a while, but you have a strong background. Yeah, so he works on Kiwazawa Manshi. His dissertation work was on this important philosopher, predecessor to Kyoto School, arguably an influential figure on the tradition. He's an avid translator, so if you haven't read any of his translations, you may find yourself reading them in the future. So he, just to name some of the figures he's translated, Tosaka Jun, he has some translations, Kiwazawa Manshi, of course, Takahashi Satomi, we're gonna hear about him today. And of course, also he's avidly translating Nishida and Tanabe. There's a forthcoming text by Nishida, The Issue of Consciousness, that he's translating with Satoshi Urai, Satoshi being here, as well as, is it Serida's also involved? Sova Serida is also involved in this, so that will be coming out soon with Edinburgh University Press, so look out for that. New Nishida for those of you reading in translation. It's an exciting time. Dennis can't translate the text fast enough for me, but it's not, he's doing his best to give me those translations as soon as he can, as quickly as he can. Yeah, so just a couple of publications I'll mention. He's published a number of essays. One, The Legacy of German Idealism in F.H. Bradley and His Influence on the Early Nishida, as well as German Idealist Conceptions of Freedom in Modern Japanese Philosophy, and many others. Dennis and I have been collaborating for some time, since around 2020. We've given talks together in Berlin and at the Freie Universität and at the University of Kyoto. Yeah, and Dennis has taught me a lot about Kyoto School, and yeah, I'm sure that today he will also teach you something. So the talk today is The Inquiry Revisited, the Takahashi Nishida Debate on Meaning. So join me in welcoming Dennis.
Okay, good morning. There was a very sensible rule at Erasmus University Rotterdam where I studied. The rule was no philosophy before 11 a.m. And I made this schedule, so I really betrayed my home institution. Anyway, yeah, Takahashi Satomi, it's interesting. When we were designing the summer school that preceded this conference, we designed a poster to promote it. And on the poster it said, we will think together with people like, and here we go in order, Nishida, Takahashi, Tanabe. You see that order? Is Takahashi even a Kyoto school philosopher? I would doubt it, but I guess the place that he got is there because now we start to see or recognize the fact that Takahashi probably had a major impact on the development of Nishida's early philosophy. During the summer school, Greg mentioned the critique explicitly, Carl mentioned the critique explicitly, and I'll go into more detail, having translated the critique, and I hope it will come out soon. I already have a couple of people that are interested in it, so that's great. So yeah, Takahashi Satomi, I don't think we should not see him as a Kyoto School member. He's on the periphery, he's in Sendai. So he's instrumental to the development of Nishida's early philosophy, but then also instrumental to the development of Tanabe Hajime's logical species. He's constantly engaging in debate with the Kyoto School figures. My own interest in this debate is, well, first I was interested in Tosaka Jun, and Tosaka Jun also has a critique of Nishida on the basis of Nishida's account of meaning from a Marxist point of view. So then I found out that Takahashi also has a critique on the basis of meaning, not from a Marxist point of view. And ever since I've sort of been fascinated, I guess, or trying to sketch the contours of what I would call like a meaning controversy, as it happens in Japanese philosophy, that goes all the way from 1912, this review, all the way to Tosaka. I will focus on Takahashi today, but I do want to sort of connect some dots to see if I can connect my way from the Takahashi critique to the Tosaka Jun critique. That would be ideal if I can get that done. But it's a work in progress. What I'm giving you is probably what will be the preface to the translation of the critique. But I will need your input, so Itabashi-sensei, if you notice something. Otherwise, it will be published. So this is a chance to do something about that. The second briefer part, I will stay brief about it, but I do want to connect to the Tosaka Jun, is part of a much bigger paper in which I try to defend Nishida against Tosaka, which I don't think necessarily has been done yet, not in the English-speaking scholarship. So following the publication of Nishida Kitaro's An Inquiry into the Good in 1911, Takahashi Satomi, so the person you see down right, wrote a review titled The Facts of the Phenomena of Consciousness and Their Meaning, reading in Nishida's An Inquiry into the Good. And it was published in two parts in the 1912 May and June issues of Tetsugaku Zashi, so Journal for Philosophy, I guess that would be translated. Nishida wrote a response. This is interesting. It was also published in the same year in the October issue of Tetsugaku Zashi. And so Takahashi's review resulted in, as Noe Keiichi calls it, or puts it, the first full-fledged philosophical debate that took place in modern Japan. A claim that, while inaccurate, does serve to illustrate that well before there was any talk of a Kyoto school of philosophy, Nishida was already contributing to a culture of philosophical debate by engaging with his critics. I say inaccurate because, especially for Satoshi and myself, being on Team Kiyosawa Manshi, we always feel a little bit sad when people skip over the Meiji period, as if in the Meiji period no philosophy happened at all, right? Okay, I stand corrected, double correction. Okay, how about Edo? But already, I will maybe come back to it a little bit later, but already in the 1890s, you get what is called the materialism debate, also carried out in Tetsugaku Zashi, yeah, same journal. And then you have people like Kato Hiroyuki, you have Inoue Enryo, Kiyosawa Manshi, all engaging each other in debate. So I would say that that was maybe closer to the first full-fledged philosophical debate, not this one, but... So Takahashi, who was no more than a graduate student at Tokyo University when he wrote the review, would go on to assume a post at Tohoku University in Sendai in 1921, from where he would develop his own philosophical standpoint while continuing to engage Kyoto School notables in debate. Okay, that's everything I have to say about Takahashi and Nishida, apart from what actually happens in the review. My aim in this talk is to consider the actual impact of Takahashi's review on Nishida's thinking, by showing how that review starts Nishida down a path of the ontologization of meaning. While in the English language scholarship, Gereon Kopf has discussed the debate between Takahashi and Nishida in detail, including Nishida's reply to Takahashi, what I want to do is specifically focus on one aspect of the Takahashi-Nishida exchange, namely their discussion about meaning, and show Takahashi's critique on this point turned out to be potent enough to trigger a shift in the way Nishida addresses meaning in the 1917 Intuition and Reflection in Self-Consciousness. That work can accordingly be read as serving Takahashi of a direct reply, even when Nishida does not mention him by name. While the bulk of my talk is dedicated to the Nishida-Takahashi debate on meaning, I also want to show how this exchange leads Nishida to develop an ontology of meaning that would end up being the target of another key thinker who engages Nishida in a debate on the nature of meaning, namely Tosaka Jun. By the time of the 1920 The Issue of Consciousness, or so is my claim, we already see Nishida discuss precisely the kind of autonomous operation of meaning that would end up being the target of Tosaka's criticism. While I will have to keep my discussion of Tosaka's criticism very brief, connecting Takahashi's critique to that of Tosaka shows Takahashi's intervention in Nishida's early philosophical development to have been consequential enough to end up resulting in a wider controversy on meaning in modern Japanese philosophy, of which my talk can no more than sketch the contours. Okay. Let me begin by examining the inquiry's inconsistent account of meaning, relate Takahashi's critique of that account, and show how Nishida's intuition and reflection in self-consciousness, I do the same thing you do, Greg, can be read as parrying it. The inquiry is, on many fronts, a curious book. Although the part of the work that is the focal point of Takahashi's critique, and that continues to have the liveliest reception today in the English-speaking world, is the first part on pure experience, it was the last to be written. The second part on reality is supposed to be the work's starting point, which means that in terms of writing, the first and the second parts are the farthest apart. This perhaps is the reason why they contain an inconsistent account of meaning. The bad kind of inconsistent, Greg, not the good kind. Something that has not gone unnoticed. So if you read the introduction, Abe Masao translation to the inquiry, you will see Abe Masao also point this out. Whereas in the first part, we read that a truly pure experience has no meaning whatsoever. It is simply a present consciousness of facts just as they are. In the second part, bottom citation, Nishida argues that true reality is not simply an existence, but something with meaning. But since pure experience is true reality, Nishida is evidently contradicting himself by arguing that it both does and does not have meaning. This being the case, it would only be a matter of time before a perceptive critic like Takahashi would come along to target precisely this inconsistency. To reconstruct Takahashi's critique, let us begin by considering why in the first part of the inquiry, Nishida denies that true reality has meaning. Nishida there views meaning as parts of judgment occurring in thought. When pure experience happens, it is just fact. To use Nishida's example, when I see a running horse, this is simply a factual event bearing no significance. It is true reality happening just as it is. When I judge that I see a running horse, this judgment is constituted by meaning pieces, or so I would call them. An eye that sees a running horse. Meaning pieces that result when reflection shatters the fact of pure experience. In that original experience, there is no eye that sees a running horse. For the distinction of subject, object, and a relation between them has there not yet arisen. Qua object, a running horse is an abstract meaning that forms a part of judgment, not a concrete fact. Facts are prior to thought and give thought its content. They are to be experienced or intuited and cannot be known otherwise. For Nishida, the primary characteristic of pure experience is its strict unity. The pure experience of seeing a running horse is a unified whole, a continuity without gaps. Temporal duration does not affect an experience's purity. No matter whether the event of seeing a running horse lasts 5 seconds or 10 minutes, as long as attention is maintained, it constitutes a single, unified instance of pure experience. As Nishida writes, this means that the sphere of pure experience coincides with the sphere of attention. When something else captures my attention, so I'm looking at the horse, beep, beep, some car honks, right? I am taken out of the experience of seeing a running horse, and it becomes a consciousness that I can look back at in reflective thought. In reflective thought, this consciousness and the abstract moments of meaning of which it consists become the various parts of judgment. Reflection introduces disunity into an originally unified experience, and it is this disunity that creates the oppositions of, for instance, subject and object, needed to distinguish meanings in the first place. The dualism implied in this treatment of meaning and fact presents Nishida with a hard-to-solve problem, one that, popping up as it does in different guises throughout his oeuvre, draws Nishida into an extended game of a philosophical whack-a-mole. On the one hand, pure experience or concrete fact is characterized by strict unity, implying that it cannot be the bearer of disunity. On the other hand, abstract meanings, which are the products of disunity that manifest in reflective thought, are supposed to be about pure experience, for precisely facts give thought its content. It's completely unclear, however, how that which is in a state of disunity could ever be about that which is in a state of unity. The abstract disunified judgment, I see a running horse, cannot have anything to do with the concrete, strictly unified, factual experience of seeing a horse, for these two are essentially two different things. Since they are essentially different, it is equally unclear how something that is in a state of unity could magically convert into something that is in a state of disunity once it is made into an object of reflection. That is, on Nishida's account, there is a fundamental chasm between fact and meaning that cannot logically be bridged unless they either turn out somehow to be the same or are connected by a third. Realizing the problem and that the latter option, so connecting them through a third, means getting caught in an infinite regress, Nishida chooses to argue that while reflective thought appears to be different from pure experience, reflective thought is in fact yet another instance of it. That is, while pure experience and the reflection on it are two different consciousnesses, the first being the original consciousness that the second looks back on, they are ultimately the same in both being instances of pure experience. As a consequence, we never actually leave the sphere of pure experience, not even in reflection. Phenomenologically, Nishida's argument appears to be sound. After all, reflective thinking is just as much characterized by unity, the hallmark of pure experience, as the sensuous experience of seeing a running horse is. Philosophers will recognize the experience of being so lost in thought that ideas seem to unfold on their own. Ideas are like horses galloping across meadows, keeping us spellbound. Considered in this way, reflective thought indeed appears to simply be yet another instance of pure experience. Logically, however, Nishida is saddled with a serious problem, and this is the level at which Takahashi's critique operates. As we have seen, Nishida's proposed solution to closing the chasm between meaning and fact is to posit reflection as yet another instance of pure experience. But as Takahashi writes, if we see this idea through, then the characteristics that Nishida offered to distinguish the two, so reflection and pure experience, whether their unity is strict or not, whether their unfolding is free or not, etc., are no longer grounds for distinguishing them. What Takahashi means is that pure experience was supposed to be characterized by strict unity, and strict unity alone. Yet one's reflection, which is marked by disunity, is admitted into the domain of pure experience, that domain immediately turns impure, and pure experience itself becomes no more than abstract meaning, or gains precisely that which it is not supposed to have. As Takahashi puts it, we can now no longer bifurcate the whole of consciousness into two sides and regard pure experience only the unified parts of consciousness and consider as impure experience the parts that are marked by opposition. In effect, Nishida's proposed solution has disunity or opposition be a moment of unity or identity, turning everything into pure experience. As Takahashi astutely observes, pure experience must be absolute experience. Greg will say, yes, exactly. On pain of contradiction, nothing can go beyond it, and there can accordingly be no consciousness that magically steps beyond its bounds to look back on it in reflection, to make judgments about it. Since meaning depends on the difference between reflection and pure experience, but that difference has disappeared because everything is now pure experience, there can no longer be any meaning whatsoever. Meaning has gone missing. So ever since Greg introduced the problem of the missing difference to me, I've been seeing the problem everywhere. So now we have an ethical version of the problem of the missing difference. I think in Tanabe we have a sociological version of the problem of the missing difference. I want to coin this one maybe the semantic version of the problem of the missing difference. Takahashi wonders where meaning went. Unity, while being unity, and difference, while being difference, must be pure experience, must be reality. How is impure experience, that is, meaning, possible? Nishida's solution of merging reflection with pure experience, once thought through, logically speaking, leaves us stranded in an absolute realm in which there is only the brute fact of intuitive knowing. The meanings that are needed to form judgments can never arise, For there is never a moment when the absolute sphere of pure experience is left, and that of reflection, an independent realm beyond that of pure experience, entered. And this is a pure experience. As Takahashi points out, as a consequence, As Takahashi points out, as a consequence, propositions such as consciousness is the sole reality or matter is the sole reality can have no meaning whatsoever, nor can their veracity ever be judged. Since we would want to be able to claim that one of these propositions is true while the other is false, we need meaning, which on Nishida's account we cannot get. Takahashi therefore goes on to offer an alternative account, which Takahashi himself already says this is inadequate. Okay? Takahashi himself is just trying something. He knows it's defective. But the alternative account in hindsight, thank you. In hindsight, that is, when we take the subsequent development of Nishida's philosophy into account, is most interesting. So here's the alternative Takahashi attempt at explaining meaning. Takahashi's attempt at keeping the realm of meaning from being assimilated into the realm of fact takes the form of a consideration of the difference between the concepts of being and nothing. The concept of nothing, Takahashi argues, is a fact of consciousness, and hence the concept of nothing appears to be an instance of the concept of being. This robs the concept of nothing of an independent meaning. The concept of nothing is, and is not given the opportunity to not be. How then, Takahashi asks his reader, is it possible for the concept of nothing to break into the all-encompassing system of reality called consciousness? He goes on to answer, I think it is difficult to answer this question satisfactorily unless we distinguish between the facts of the phenomena of consciousness and their meaning. This is the title of his critique in the first place, so this is pretty much the heart of it, probably. That is, to be able to have the concept of nothing in a meaningful way, it must be distinct from the concept of being, and not yet another instance of it. And for this to be possible, the fact of the concept of nothing must point beyond itself, to its meaning, as the Takahashi says, pure negation of reality. This meaning must reside in a realm other than that of fact. And if fact is the realm of reality, then meaning must be located in the realm of unreality. As Takahashi puts it, I'm here, okay. Although abstract concepts are generally real as facts of consciousness, the reason for their abstractness is that they indicate something other than the fact of their own concrete self. And as the meaning that is indicated is what is common among the individual phenomena of consciousness, it should itself be called unreal. In other words, Takahashi's solution is to posit an unreal realm of universals that transcends particular facts, a realm that is different from the real realm of facts and where facts can find their meaning. Takahashi is fully aware that his proposed solution formally reintroduces the very dualism, here we go again, the very dualism Nishida sought to avoid. I'll avoid that one. Nishida's dualism boiled down to the opposition between facts as marked by unity and meanings as marked by disunity. A dualism he effectively sought to resolve by making disunity into a moment of unity. Takahashi's dualism is that of real fact and unreal meaning. And just as in Nishida's case it was unclear how pure experience as a strict unity could turn into the disunity of meaning, or how meaning could be about pure experience, In Takahashi's case, it's unclear how facts and meanings could in principle be related. He writes, even if, in the case of phenomena of consciousness, the distinction between fact and meaning is possible, how can we tell whether a meaning correctly points to a fact or not? If meaning itself is unreal, then how does it correspond with the facts? More specifically, the problem Takahashi faces here is that of truth. Recall that Takahashi set out to save meaning in order to save the possibility of the truth or falsity of propositions, such that claims like consciousness is the sole reality or matter is the sole reality could be judged for their veracity. Takahashi's solution has the proposition consciousness is the sole reality be a fact of consciousness that points beyond itself to the realm of meaning, there to find its truth or falsity. Traditionally, however, truth is a matter of correspondence, and falsity a lack of it. For my subjective idea to be true, it must correspond to reality as it objectively is. For it to be false, it must differ from reality as it objectively is. Yet, Takahashi's solution renders correspondence impossible. After all, my subjective idea that consciousness is the sole reality, which qua fact of consciousness is real, can never correspond to the objective truth that consciousness indeed is the sole reality, which qua meaning is unreal. While Takahashi has demonstrated the inadequacy of Nishida's account of meaning in the inquiry, which has meaning vanish in the meaninglessness of true reality or pure experience itself, he acknowledges that his own attempt at reinstating a basic dualism of meaning and fact breaks down as long as we adhere to the correspondence theory of truth. If anything, for Nishida, Takahashi's struggle to offer an alternative must have driven home the point that meaning fact dualism is inadequate and best to be avoided. Bearing this in mind, let us turn to intuition and reflection in self-consciousness to consider Nishida's renewed attempt at thinking meaning in light of Takahashi's critique. At first glance, intuition and reflection in self-consciousness may seem like a work that is entirely unconcerned with Takahashi's critique. If anything, what is immediately noticeable as one moves from the inquiry to intuition and reflection in self-consciousness is a shift in discourse, according to me, from one that is classically German and British idealist to one that is neo-Kantian in orientation. It appears that Nishida is simply moving on to converse with a different group of interlocutors, a group that, since Takahashi receives no mention, apparently does not include him. However, one does not have to read between the lines to, in intuition and reflection and self-consciousness, detect a concern with Takahashi's problematization of the inquiry's treatment of meaning and fact, and his proposed solution to it. As Nishida writes in the preface, his aim in intuition and reflection in self-consciousness is to rethink each dimension of the real in light of what I call the system of self-consciousness, and thereby to clarify a problem considered fundamental in contemporary philosophy, namely between value and being, and between meaning and fact. Although this could simply be read as a statement of Nishida's desire to engage with typically neo-Kantian themes, certain remarks betray Nishida's concern with rejecting Takahashi's suggesting of treating meaning as something unreal. Nishida writes how he is convinced that meaning belongs to the real, and that this conviction is based on the fact that we can conceive it in accord with the categories of existence. In other words, even if facts point to meanings beyond themselves, of these meanings we can still say that they fall under the concept of being. Being can be the universal of universals, for all universals are. As we have seen, not to say so is to risk an immediate and painfully obvious breakdown of the correspondence theory of truth. The leitmotif of intuition and reflection in self-consciousness, which in Nishida's words is to venture an explanation of how, at a certain time and a certain place, a certain individual can consider a universally valid truth, clarifies that Nishida's concern is equally with truth, or with the ability, problematized by Takahashi, of judging a certain proposition to be true. Since Takahashi placed meaning outside of the realm of being in order to avoid losing meaning altogether, if meaning is to be pulled back into the realm of being, as Nishida seeks to do, then the question is how this conjunction of meaning and existence is possible. This is the core issue of intuition and reflection and self-consciousness. Or at least I hope to start reading it as such, because what intuition and reflection in self-consciousness is exactly about, it's a daunting text. So this is a novel angle to read it through. Nishida rejects the unreality of meaning to instead make it part of, as Takahashi put it, the all-encompassing system of reality called consciousness. If meaning is a part of the system of reality, rather than a member of the realm of the unreal, then since meaning does not transcend the facts, meaning must be immanent to them. In effect, it means that the discussion that plays out between Takahashi and Nishida can be framed in terms of abstract and concrete universals. Whereas Takahashi regards meanings as abstract universals that are to be placed outside of being, Nishida, in Intuition and Reflection in Self-Consciousness, explores the possibility of making meaning into a concrete universal that is to be placed inside of the beings themselves, to be at work in them. This is how Nishida envisions the conjunction of meaning and existence. It is the immanence of the concrete universal in the particulars that fall under it. One other thing I would love to do as soon as possible is try to connect this to Basho idea, because it seems to already, in a nutshell, have certain features of that. Still, the way in which Nishida conceives of facts has not changed from the inquiry. The judgment, I see a running horse, is rooted in the fact of seeing a running horse, which is an event in which a subject, an object, and a relation between them has not yet been distinguished. That is, facts remain a matter of what Nishida in the inquiry calls pure experience. And since the concept of pure experience is thought, and since when the concept of pure experience is thought through, everything turns out to be pure experience is absolute, there ultimately is only one fact, namely the brute fact of pure experience. I think Nishida himself from 1932 just starts calling it fact. We talked about this in the summer school. It remains completely unintelligible how this one fact could become meaning if meaning requires differentiation. Right? Meaning requires negation, the not, which is precisely what the debate between Takahashi and Nishida seems to be about. It is therefore also unclear how meaning, as a concrete universal, could become immanent to particular facts, for there are no facts in the plural for meaning to become immanent to. The problem once more is the transition from strict unity to disunity. The Nishida of Intuition and Reflection seemingly attempts to find a solution in the neo-Kantian idea of the drawing of the limit. The problem that plagues the inquiry can be reformulated in these terms. Since pure experience is absolute, it is all-encompassing. Being all-encompassing, we cannot draw the limit that is necessary to of something say that it lies outside of pure experience. Accordingly, we cannot legitimately posit a type of reflection that steps outside of pure experience to, from a position thus occupied, look back at the pure experience and make the claim that consciousness is the sole reality. Since this limit cannot be drawn, we cannot obtain the basic extinction that is needed for meaning to arise. Or can we? In Intuition and Reflection and Self-Consciousness, Nishida seems to argue that the limit we seek can be drawn inside of pure experience itself. This limit does not demarcate the domain of the absolute from a domain external to it. That's impossible. But reflects the internal self-division of the absolute. Such drawing of the limits inside of the absolute allows us to save the possibility of knowing, for it is responsible for the bifurcation that is needed for meaning to arise. And now this text becomes especially difficult. For Nishida, reality is now a self-aware system that internally delimits itself by reflecting itself in itself. The basic model for this operation is Fichte's self, which in self-awareness makes its own activity its object and reflects upon it. We had a discussion about Jikaku today with, I think, Professor Priest. This also is definitely an instance of the idea of Jikaku being explained, but in this case connected to Fichte. And I don't have time, but if I would have had time, I would have elaborated that in fact this whole Jikaku idea already originates with Kiyosawa Manshi, who pretty much uses it to translate Kant's unity of apperception. So that's where the whole Jikaku comes from, in my current estimation. However, whereas in the case of Fichte, the self spoken of is that of subjectivity, for Nishida, who in Schillingian fashion, already in the inquiry, declares that nature possesses a kind of self too, any item in the system of reality can be thought of as a self that reflects itself in itself, is the product of such self-reflection, or both. And just as in Fichte's case, in the self I oppose a divisible not self to the divisible self, Nishida uses the logic of self-reflection to not only unify, but also make intelligible oppositions such as that of intuition or pure experience, and reflection, sensibility, understanding, form and content, and fact and meaning. Been trying to figure out concrete instances of this, but this is the best one I could find in Intuition and Reflection and Self-Consciousness. His preferred example there of how this is supposed to work concretely is rectilinearity. While a line segment is an object of the sense of sight, the straight line, which goes on to infinity, is an ideal, that is, imperceptible object of thought. And yet we somehow know that the line segment is a segment of the infinite straight line. Nishida thinks this to be possible because the line segment is the product of the self-reflection and self-delimitation of the infinite straight line as one of the myriad self-aware systems that are products of the infinite self-reflection of the overarching system of reality. The meaning of the line segment is now that it refers to and autonomously works towards the whole, which is possible because that whole, the infinite straight line, is immanent in it. This working of the meaning of the line segment towards the infinite straight line is what we subjectively call thinking, which derives its necessary and end-oriented character from such working. Objectively speaking, however, what happens is the free, self-determining activity of reality as a self-aware system. So the phenomenology of meaning suggested here is that in thinking, meaning unpacks itself to, through its own self-activity, lead to the knowledge not only that the line segment is part of the infinite straight line, but that this seemingly abstract piece of geometry is underpinned by a vast system of consciousness, or what I earlier called the one brute fact of pure experience, which now becomes knowable from inside of reality itself. That's intuition and reflection in self-consciousness to the extent I can make sense of it. Going on to 1920, the issue of consciousness. There, this way of thinking about meaning as autonomously operative in consciousness is evident in the first essay, What Does Consciousness Mean? There, Nishida writes, an act of consciousness is an internal transition from meaning to meaning, where an internal transition of meaning is a meaning as itself a force evoking another meaning. Meanings all possess an inclination to be realized, an inclination to be held in consciousness, without which meaning could not maintain itself. Such inclinations are what are referred to as our mental acts. An illustration of how this concretely works is given using James's analysis of the consciousness of a single sentence. It is conceivable that when we are sequentially conscious of a single sentence, the meaning of the whole is contained in the consciousness of each of its words. In What Does Consciousness Mean? So this chapter in the issue of consciousness, Nishida's musings on meaning include ontological considerations of how meaning realizes itself. He writes, that a meaning evokes another meaning, that is, the internal transition of meaning, must mean that infinite meaning is unified in a single subjectum, shutai in the Japanese. From one determinate meaning, another meaning cannot issue, for a meaning is determined, containing other possible determinations in its background, which is to say, determined on a more concrete foundation, determined on the basis of on plus meon, being plus non-being. To stand on the basis of such a subjectum of the world of possibility is for meaning itself to possess force, and an internal transition is the becoming explicit of what was implicit in this foundation. Such is how meaning transitions internally, the format of meaning at work. While the ontologization of meaning towards which Takahashi's critique pushed Nishida's philosophical development is here on full display, since Nishida thinks that the contemplation of a single meaning piece, letting the meaning piece be at work, will lead to the whole of which that meaning piece is a part, namely the system of reality, it comes as no surprise that Nishida, in his writings going forward, frequently discusses the meaning of some X or the significance of some Y. The title of the first essay, included in the issue of consciousness, What Does Consciousness Mean?, is a case in point. Rather than going with the simpler title, What is Consciousness?, Nishida is clearly inquiring into the meaning of consciousness. Should be clear that Nishida is not doing so because he's interested in the definition of consciousness. Instead, I take him to want to consider what happens when we let the meaning piece consciousness develop on its own in thinking about it. Nishida's point, of course, is that when we do that, the meaning of consciousness, being at work, unpacks itself, autonomously leading to the truth it intends, which is the meaning whole, or the all-embracing system of reality. Any meaning piece only makes sense against the background of this more concrete foundation, Nishida's words. This, or so I submit, is the aim with which Nishida poses any other "what does X mean?" type question, which he then answers following the same logic. The very logic Nishida wants to demonstrate the operation of. Now I get close to the end. I promise some Tosaka. Precisely this feature of Nishida's thinking is what would draw the ire of Tosaka Jun, who in his 1935 The Japanese Ideology complains that Nishida frequently employs phrases as "such and such can be thought of," "such and such has the significance of," and "such a thing as such and such," and that Nishida only thematizes the meaning of things, caring only about society, history, and nature insofar as they feature in a categorical system of meaning. Nishida is most likely one of the targets when Tosaka earlier in the 1932 Philosophy of Technology writes that today's metaphysicians, for the sake of the self-interpretation of life, being, self-consciousness, Nishida's Jikaku, etc., each erect categorical systems, yet do nothing to verify their systems in accordance with the facts, because they are solely interested in the appreciation of meaning. That is, the ontology of meaning Nishida developed as a result of his exchange with Takahashi ends up landing him embroiled in a wider controversy on the nature of meaning, but this time with one of his Marxist interlocutors. For Tosaka, this kind of ontology of meaning developed by Nishida is the pinnacle of a bourgeois idealist philosophy that has no interest in or need for material facts and their technical manipulation, preferring the solace of systems of meaning that promise unlimited conceptual freedom instead. In the Japanese ideology, Tosaka problematizes the kind of meaning that gains the ability to build up a world of meaning by relying on the mutual connection between meanings themselves. And it does when meaning is substituted for the facts, to the point where the facts of reality even become the facts that have been created by meaning. Tosaka suggests that meaning loses its arbitrariness as soon as it is once again made accountable to the facts. For the facts of material reality, unlike the purely conceptual systems of metaphysics and theology, cannot without immediate practical consequences be manipulated at will. I think I'm doing pretty well on the time, right? I didn't see any signs yet. 5. Oh, this is going to be another one of those Namu Amida Butsu moments. Although my discussion of Tosaka was necessarily brief, I hope it suffices to demonstrate that Takahashi's criticism of Nishida was to have consequences for the course Japanese philosophy as a whole was to run, eventually landing Nishida in another controversy on meaning with one of his fiercest Marxist critics. Let me, in closing, reflect on the supposed arbitrariness of Nishida's conceptual system of metaphysics. Following Tosaka's analysis in the Japanese ideology, one gets the impression that he means to say that Nishida is only interested in the world of meaning because it is one he can freely manipulate, as opposed to the real world, which he cannot. To be more precise, since Nishida cannot have actual social political freedom, so imagines 1930s Japan with thought control going on, he contents himself with an imagined freedom in the realm of concept. But is the conceptual realm that Nishida is exploring so easily manipulable? Is mastery of that realm simply a matter of the, as Tosaka appears to put it, cheap association of ideas? The worlds of mathematics and logic are set in stone, and although one can freely choose to deny certain laws, once accepted, those same laws heavily restrict one's conceptual freedom of movement. When they stand in the service of truth, concepts turn out to be no more easily manipulable than, say, material objects used in physical experimentation. The conceptual realm, then, may be easily manipulable to some, but cannot be to those who seek the truth. After all, ideas seem to unfold or be at work following a logic of their own. They are like horses galloping across meadows, keeping us spellbound. That's it.
Thanks, Dennis.
Oh yeah, you go.
Let's see if I can use this.
Yeah, it just broke down.
Okay. All right, thanks so much, Dennis. We have about 30 minutes for Q&A, and I will efface myself for your sake, and if there's time, I will ask my list of questions. Okay, Graham.
Good.
Yeah, try to leave it a little.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that was terrific. I never really understood how Nishida got into his middle period, the Basho period.
Yes.
And what you've described is really illuminating for me, so thank you. And you're right, this is taking us right into the Basho period.
Yeah, it seems to, right? Yeah.
And I'll talk more about that this afternoon.
Oh, great. Okay, great.
But just a comment.
Yeah.
What I think you find in the Basho period is that Nishida comes to accept the contradiction that you're gesturing at. So when you started, you said that this is not the acceptable kind of contradiction, but the turn I think that Nishida makes in the middle period is exactly to say the situation is contradictory. And here he's drawing on Hegel, but something he's really drawing on is his Zen Buddhist tradition, because the Zen Buddhists, or the Buddhists in general, have been grappling with this problem of how you conceptualize the unconceptualizable. I mean, conceptualization is just another word for meaning, as you made clear. So
exactly.
he takes up some of the ideas from Buddhism about how on earth you try to conceptualize the unconceptualizable, and that's built into the Basho framework. So, I mean, it's not a question, I'm sorry, it's a comment.
Oh,
But
yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your comment. It's interesting. During the summer school, we have been talking about Nishida and his inspirations. I think, as you know, Greg and I tried to push a little bit more about the German idealism inspiration. Obviously, there's many people say that there is a Zen Buddhist influence going on, but it seems to me that in the case of German idealism and Zen Buddhism, and especially Zen Buddhism as you described, this seemed to have the same kind of concern, right? Also the nature of self-reflection and its possibility. So I guess we can conclude, I guess, even the summer school by saying that, these match quite nicely, and they, give Nishida the kind of conceptual tools, right? He needs to actually conceptualize the problem of the unconceptualizability of the concept, or, sorry. Yeah, so, yes. No, it's, thank you for saying that, because I myself have been thinking to myself, this gets to Basho. I just want to, I just need to work it out. That's the problem. I need to work it out. Yeah.
And it's
I know
also,
you did some. Yeah.
it's also very clear from as we said, I think we were talking about this yesterday in the last essay, where he's explicitly drawing on both of them, as you say. So this becomes explicit. Even if it were implicit earlier, it becomes explicit. CY. A little distance from yourself, because otherwise it's just...
So, thank you for your paper, but my question is, I think, unlike going to the self-conscious period, or I would say self-awareness period, or the Basho period, or even the later Nishida. I think this debate, we need to go back to the very early Nishida. He had that time had no concept of Basho, no concept of even Jigaku. So that was the very basic, starting point of Nishida's philosophy as just a very ambitious project of explaining everything by pure experience, and that was, I think, exactly what Takahashi tried to argue that may not be really successful. And I think in Takahashi's paper, actually he was actually trying to rather than staying clear, there's a disagreement between them, but actually there's some kind of agreement, namely Takahashi appreciated Nishida's effort to bringing everything into a kind of in an inquiry into the good, this religious.
Yes, he says that. Yes.
And because this book actually in the finished product, Nishida put religion as I think one of the most important tasks of this early project.
So, no, exactly, completely,
So these will be I think the agreement there. And but my question is, if we have to go beyond this early debate, I think we need to add that since Takahashi later is a kind of Husserlian. So at that time, so this early Takahashi is not yet a really becoming very Husserl. But
what's 1912, but definitely we see that he is very aware of the sort of debate on universals going on in that time. So he definitely is reading some.
But at that time it is, I think, on the way to Husserl. So he actually studied in Europe in I think 1925. So later he actually had a much better understanding of Husserl. So my question is, if we trying to go beyond this early Nishida-Takahashi debate and trying to recontextualize with the later Tokusaka or even the Basho thing. So maybe another good point is to see how the Takahashi would further debate with Nishida with some kind of Husserlian development. Exactly. For example, the difference between Zen and Bedeutung, the different meanings. I think at that time, in this early debate, nobody really mentioned the differences between the two. So there is a lot of ambiguity in this notion of meaning. But later, I think Takahashi would be very much clear with the use of the concept of meaning. And Nishida should also be much more clear with his own meaning or meaningless meaning in this later Nishida. So what will be your prediction of another further development?
Oh no, but with Takahashi, I mean, if only I have time. No, my next in the Takahashi department, but I don't have time. But I translated the whole essay on time by Takahashi Satomi, and there's a clear criticism there of Nishida's account of time, and that would be my next project, to work out the debate on time that they have. Yes, but yeah, Takahashi, there's too few of us translating, too few of us working on him, even though he's so important. Yeah, so yeah. Okay, well, don't wait till you can. It will take a lot of time.
Let's, as we go around, let's try to keep the formulation of the question under 2 minutes. Sorry. Keep a distance.
Yeah. Thank you, Dennis, for this presentation. It's really clear and helpful. To keep it short, if the central question for the debate is how is conjoining of the experience and the reality, meaning and experience is possible, why, or has Nishida ever think about the Kantian route, to say from the a priori synthesis, and to delimit delimiting the universality via the transcendental deduction, while he sort of jumped to the Fichtian answer first. And it seems that he mentioned Kant in the reflection, intuition reflection in the self-consciousness, right?
I guess he does, but I mean, already in the inquiry, it's quite clear that Nishida is not going to play by Kant's rules. Already there, it's quite clear that Nishida is talking about people like Schelling, Fichte. So I think Nishida is already past Kant even when he gets here, right? I mean, Kant is not really an option, never really an option for him anyway, even from the inquiry starting. So, well, it's post-Kant. Kant is sort of the Basho in the inquiry, because Kant is that he made himself nothing to. Kant is there, but he is sort of in the. Kant is there in virtue of the inquiry being so post-Kantian rationalist, right? So. But Nishida is not a Kantian from early on at all, right? Never really is.
I think the question was maybe why is Kant not a live option for him?
Okay.
I guess that may be the question, like why is he already wrong?
Well, I
from the
mean,
beginning?
Kant is a
Maybe.
dualist, right?
Yeah.
And so Kant is a dualist, so yeah, the dualism has to be overcome. And the post-Kantian rationalists, like people like Fichte, people like Schelling, all try to overcome the basic dualism. Right, so I would say from very early on, Nishida is precisely doing that. But
Perfect.
Yeah,
Christian?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of have two questions, so I know the clock is ticking. So thank you for such a rich presentation. This is incredible. It was super interesting. So actually, yeah, this Tosaka, the way that you reconstruct the sort of process through which Nishida comes to this sort of framework, I feel like kind of displaces Tosaka's critique. It's its own sort of commodity fetishism, you know? Because I think the question is, you'd ask, like, well, Tosaka, like, what are facts? And Nishida kind of started from pure experience and found that it generated this problem. So I don't know if, like, maybe from the perspective that you've generated, there's a sort of, like, internal to Nishida's own philosophy, a response to Tosaka. I don't know how you feel about this. But the other question I have is, you mentioned that Nishida published his own response in Tetsugaku Zashi in 1912. You jumped to to intuition or reflection, which I take as the more robust response. So I'm actually just kind of curious, like as a historical curiosity, what was his response in 1912?
So wait, let me start with my answer to your second question is easy. I don't know. The next thing would be, here we go. This is my way of working. I will have to translate the whole thing. Gerenkov already wrote an article about it, and I decided not to. Obviously, I could have read it and then reinvent the wheel, right? But I decided that it would be more interesting to try to connect the dots to Tosaka. So yeah, that's my honest answer there. With the Tosaka question, one thing I noticed, but maybe it's the last night sort of nerves you have before you give a talk, right? I was reading it and I was thinking to myself, one of the problems here, definitely, I don't know if this is what you're also talking about, but one of the problems here is that when Tosaka says fact and meaning and Nishida says fact and meaning, they're not even talking about the same thing. Is that something somebody's nodding head. Is that something you're hinting at, or is your... yeah, good question, but yeah, well, anyway, yeah.
Yes.
Tabashi-sensei.
Yeah, thank you very much for, good presentation. And my question is related to his question.
Yeah.
And firstly, you can connect both debates are connected with each other. So it's a very good, and it's a very good point. So to support you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
to support you.
Please.
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question.
Yeah.
Maybe you have to answer. And I think between two debates, there are a quite different contexts.
Yes.
Yeah? And in debate between Nishida and Takahashi, and in the last, Nishida raised the notion of reality or pure experience, including meaning. Yeah? But in debate between Tosaka and Nishida, Tosaka criticized that Nishida lacks the consideration of reality. Yeah. So both debates go, how to say, in the opposite side, yeah, opposite direction.
Yeah.
So maybe you have to
Yeah.
make a comment to answer
Yeah.
this problem.
No. Yeah. Yes, agreed. Yeah, that's the short answer. Yes, completely agreed. Yes. Like I say, last night I was like, this is not exactly matching up. So, but I'm connecting the dots. I hope this will not also turn into an infinite regress problem, but I need to ask, it's interesting, what does meaning mean in Nishida? Then I must ask, what does meaning mean in Tosaka? And then see if there's some kind of match there to be able to execute this project. And I think you felt that, and I feel it too. So thank you for confirming that that indeed needs to happen. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you.
Hi. Okay. Thank you, Dennis, sharing this insightful. I would like to ask that I'm thinking that why Takashi need to claim meaning is unreal, as unreal could be an ambiguous term. Maybe because of Nishida claim true reality, right? But I would like to ask an meta level question that why there need to judge something is real or unreal? Yeah, I'm thinking that because Takashi could just point out there is other internal conflict in Nishida's true pure experience and true reality. Thank you.
You're asking why Takahashi comes up with the alternative account in the first place? Oh,
Why unreal?
Oh, good question. No. Well, then, obviously, if I am quite sure it will be Hijitsu Zaiteki, but I wouldn't want to bet on that. But so why does Takahashi suggest unreality as a solution to Nishida's problem of? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, I think that what Takahashi is pointing out that what Nishida needs is some sort of concept of some negation needs to be operative in pure experience for it to be able to turn into reflection. I think that's what's happening here. That's the sense I get to the extent that I'm able to reconstruct it, right? So from Takahashi's point of view, Nishida is stuck in a world of just the brute fact of pure experience, and he can't leave it. The only way he can leave it is there's some kind of negation that allows him to leave the realm of pure experience into some other realm, to be able to look back at that realm of pure experience and make judgments about it. But if pure experience realm is the realm of true reality, then that alternative realm, well, the unreal, right, would be, right? The non-real, right? Anything other than pure experience, anything other than true reality will do, right? So step outside of it, and then Nishida will say, well, that's dualism again. So, right? And that's why you get this attempt at making the negation internal. But I guess if I understand you correctly, I'm not sure, but that would be my, yeah. Thank you for your question.
After.
Thanks, Dennis. Yes, I echo the praise for this brilliant work. And I'm curious, in the after Tosaka critiques basically this problem of the not Tosaka, Takahashi, the problem of the missing difference, as you've put it here. What is Nishida's response? Does he? I mean, sorry if I just didn't catch it, but like this idea of meanings or reality being somehow self-conscious, and
what's the
maybe
solution?
there's like a distinction generated by self-consciousness because reality is sort of aware of itself, and so there's already a difference there. And maybe to be more specific. I mean, with the previous question, the unreal and real. I was reading this brilliant author this morning, citing Dutch name, kind of talking about Bradley in here, and how to say that a relation, which is like a meaning, right, as a relation, is unreal, is already a contradiction, right? It's already, because it's in reality. And so I guess, to be more specific also with Graham's question, like, does Nishida, to the extent that he is addressing this problem after Takahashi, I don't know if it's middle period Nishida, does he embrace contradiction as, to some extent, as a solution to the problem of the missing difference?
What here in intuition and reflection and self-consciousness? I don't think so. That's the innovation that you get, for example, in the Basho, right? I don't think so necessarily. I know Greg will disagree with me, but I don't think so myself, but well, he can't, that's the problem, he can't really, right? So maybe that's what you're sensing, like it's an adequate, and it's an inadequate solution on the basis of what you know in the rest of the summer school. I mean, the adequate solution from Greg's point of view would come all the way in 1945, right? Yeah, because the question clearly is how, so if pure experience is the absolute, right? The question is of the negation of the absolute, right? Then obviously in the case of Greg's solution, you get nothing, self-predicating, right? To be nothing, thereby to be something, right? But that's a later solution that here does not really happen, so, yeah.
Thank you, Dennis. I have a question that kind of builds off Professor Priest's and Professor Chung's question. So I very much see this moving towards Basho, but I also very much see it kind of at play in inquiry even before Takahashi's critique. So, for instance, you mentioned a James quote from Problems of Consciousness. And that quote is already used in inquiry.
Sure.
So my question is, to what extent, across these different parts 2, the order is part 2, part 1, part 3, part 4, to what extent is Nishida himself already kind of come aware of this issue, and then Takahashi kind of spotlights it, even before Takahashi's critique? So to what extent do you think in inquiry Nishida is already kind of aware of this? Because, for instance, in the issue of consciousness, if you go back to a couple slides ago, you have when we say that a meaning evokes another meaning. And then go to the one before that as well. That's straight out of inquiry, like that exact quote. And the next one.
Previous, you mean?
Sorry, the one after it. Yeah,
like
that one feels very much like his discussion of representational thinking, daydreaming, for instance. And so I'm wondering, like, to what extent you think Nishida himself was already kind of aware of the problem in inquiry and trying to work it out before Takahashi's critique.
To what extent was he already aware? I don't think so necessarily. I mean, the first problem that Nishida has to overcome is this psychologism problem, right?
Yes.
So unless it's only really from intuition and reflection onwards that you start to see him actually properly move towards the Basho theory, because before that he is thinking of universals in a completely wrong way. Yes, well, you mentioned it yourself, right? Mental images. So the inquiry is not close to Basho, I would myself say. Obviously, yeah, of course it's going to be there in a nutshell, but
you can be not close to Basho and still be working through the problem.
Yeah, exactly. So it's, but I would say that Basho, you really, I think in this here, I start seeing some 1920 is where I start to see catch some real glimpses of something that is becoming the actual Basho. Yeah, 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 and then I want to work it out in detail. Yeah.
Excellent. We have a little time. Maybe I can
Oh.
take advantage now that I've effaced myself, and now I will come back. Yeah, thanks so much, Dennis. I, of course, really appreciate the clarity of the problem, the way it's articulated, and also it's really helpful to see issue of consciousness and how it plays a role in mediating between the Basho and the inquiry. Because this text, when you shared one of your earlier drafts with me, I had a hard time making any sense of this book.
Well,
so.
it's still the same.
Yeah, okay, still the same, okay. But now at least I see how it plays a role in the story.
Yeah, you're right.
I just want to ask two questions, and you've heard this already from me, but the first question is about inquiry, because we have this problem of missing difference, but it's really only a problem if we need to explain difference. It may just be a fact without why. It may just be that there's the fact of conceptual self-consciousness and distinction, but there's just no why. And in a way that makes sense, because Nishida says that the sort of logic can't cut it. He says that there's a mystical intuition, right? And the idea then seems to be that if it's mystical, we shouldn't expect an explanation for everything. So then one of my questions is whether the critique really is internal and not external, right? And why it is Nishida might think that he really needs to explain it when he seems to be endorsing some kind of mysticism. I mean, I guess one thought that I have, of course, is just that he thinks that in the end, a true account of the absolute actually needs to be logical, or needs to actually be able to articulate difference.
Yeah.
Right.
Of course, yeah.
And I guess the question is, that's another question, why he thinks he needs that. On the issue of contradiction, though, if you remember, you and I wrote a paper together in which we argued that Nishida actually thinks that contradictions are actually operative already, and that in a way they're true, they're just not conceptually true. Meaning, I mean, he says in Inquiry that reality is established by contradictions. So I think the question really is not whether contradictions are there, but whether they can be conceptually, whether we can know them successfully with reason. So this is just a distinction that I would make, that contradiction's there from the beginning, it seems. It's just that there isn't a logic of it yet.
Yeah.
I think that's what's interesting about Basho, is you get a logic of it.
Yeah, sure.
This is also just a comment.
Yeah, no.
That
great
contradiction's there from beginning to end. So, yeah, my second question is whether Nishida's account, like as we've presented it here, succeeds. You know, and I think Nishida himself says that it doesn't work in intuition and reflection, right? So he surrenders to the enemy camp of mysticism.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, so do you think the issue of consciousness does any better?
Well, insofar as the early Nishida in Inquiry tells you that he likes mysticism, but it's one-sided. That's pretty much the conclusion, right? So then to complete the mystical account, you need the conceptual account, right? Exactly. And then, so he's clearly here, well, in intuition and reflection of self-consciousness, you see how he's trying to work out the conceptual account, but runs into the problem of self-reflection. Yeah, exactly. Here, we looked at this together. We should look at it together. It's so interesting. Here, because obviously the Inquiry has this mystical proof for the existence of God.
Yes.
But that's great.
It's great.
If you're a religious person.
It's great.
That's great for you, Greg.
It's good for me. I like the proof. It's good proof.
But the problem is how to, on the conceptual side, also prove the existence and nature of the absolute, right? Exactly. And then here you get the weirdest of things. The ontological proof is suddenly entertained as a real option of God's existence, right? You can all verify this as soon as the translation is out. He starts to entertain the ontological proof for God to, I guess, supplement the mystical proof.
That's cool. That's cool.
Just for people who are lost, I mean, Greg and I know that, well, Greg especially knows that if you want to have a true account of the absolute, then your account of the absolute cannot just be mystical, but must also be conceptual, because if it's not conceptual, then the absolute excludes something, namely concept. So that's why it's quite clear that Nishida is aware of this problem, at least from 1970 onwards, and that's why from 1917 onwards he starts to torture himself with all the conceptual ways of trying to get the absolute to...
Hence Basho and onward. You need a logic of the whole. The whole
the
needs to be
Inquiry is such a wonderful little work where everything's okay and everything's happy. You read it and you're like, okay, this is good. Then
It's
you
a
go
nice
on to
world.
the intuition and reflection and self-conscious, and you're like, what is this?
So yeah, this is maybe related to just one last comment slash question, and then we'll be done. Is just in the intuition and reflection, the problem seems to be the same problem that you mentioned very nicely is articulated the other way. If you have this self-differentiation internally, right? So through reflection, you try to grasp the whole. You end up taking the whole as the object. And then you've split it, right? You've relativized it, and then you haven't grasped it. So then you have to continually, as infinitely approaching the absolute, but you never get there, like an asymptotic approach, right? And so then it's like, if you're in the pure experience, you lose the meaning. But if you're within meaning, you lose the intuition. And so that's why he says, basically, he had to drop the problem of reflection, because it just, once he's in meaning, he loses fact. And when he's in fact, he loses meaning. So again, that it just in a way justifies your whole presentation, but it's the same problem from the other side. If you have any comments on this, no.
I agree.
Okay, good. Yeah. So there's just many ways of articulating this one problem. Any final questions? We're exactly on time. It's beautiful. We have 1 minute. Can anyone raise a question in 30 seconds? Oh, Ben, 30 seconds.
You can raise one in 30 seconds. Oh, the issue of consciousness. His answer to the problem of?
Missing difference.
Oh,
Problem.
missing difference.
20 seconds.
Yeah.
No.
Let's
Let's talk after.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Join me in thanking Dennis one more time.
A good point. We need to work more on Satoshi. Oh, sorry. Maybe you should ask the people. Very good. You're very I don't know if that's from here. That's from there. That's from there. That's from there.
You're off the hook now.
Now in karaoke.
Maybe you need to.
Ask me the question again.
Yeah. Maybe we need to take a nap and then go to karaoke. That's gonna be.
So did you arrange the karaoke song?
I do. I did. I don't know how well it's gonna work. Right. So I booked it for 11:30. Booked it late.
Well, that's early for Dennis.
That is because
11:30 karaoke is very early for Dennis.
Yeah.
Last 2 weeks I've been going to bed at 9:30. 1:30. He's completely
Oh
exhausted.
my word.
Like you're
But then
done.
you wake up again, right?
So you can actually.
But then you
Now I'm taking this seriously.
yeah. You're gonna have to yeah.
I don't want you to forget this experience.
Yeah, no, I won't. Yeah.
This experience?
What I mean is that it's at, like I said, when you were doing hypnosis, it's at your worst when the other power appears. When you have, when you say, here I stand, I can do nothing else. Not I can do no other, but I can do nothing else.
And this guy is a true other power too.
I've been trying to be a meter for him. I'm trying to be a mediator of Amida Buddha.
So did other power appear, or did it fail
Other
to
power?
appear?
No failure to appear. No.
I
Other
mean,
power
maybe
was
in the
there.
failure to appear, the absolute appeared.
No. This was very easy.
But that's it. That's the same thing. It's the same thing, my friend.
Is other
But
power?
I don't think issue of consciousness is actually one of the fascinating things about this text for me, is this whole point about the ontological argument, which becomes like hardcore accepted at the end. But then he's like flirting with it and then seems to reject it like in Basho again. So he's like, you're asking, what does it work? Because that's why I'm like, when I'm looking at a nice order where it's just like, you know, but no, it's like, let me flip with the ontological argument, then let me give up on it in Basho, then let me come back to it again. It's like he doesn't know what he wants to do. Yeah.
Got the endorsement. Another other power has
Yes,
endorsed.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
This
Don't forget that. It's good.
it's all. Is this actually? Greg, how do you feel about this?
I feel great about it.
Okay.
Yeah, he's happy. He knows.
It's closer to God than,
Yes, I know.
than atheism, right? So,
Yes.
Well,
yes.
it's look.
Now
it's
I'm
just-
definitely halfway.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Thanks for Greg is happy. Yeah.
But I was telling Dennis he's a mediator of the unknown God anyway. Because it's in part because of Dennis, and then that I got hyper focused on the personal thing of Nishida. And the more I started thinking about what pure experience implied, then it became obvious to me what it meant.
Yeah, so if you want Greg to be less religious, you got to stop negating religion.
Honestly,
start
because
embracing
I've
Zen,
become
then
more
he'll-
radically like theistic because of my relation to this agnostic
Just hang
Dutch
out with
guy.
the Dutch.
It's so it's not supposed to happen, but it's proof of the dialectics.
No, that's
So
it's
if I hang
supposed
out-
to happen. Yeah.
Well, no, because if I hang out with you.
Testing, testing. Testing, testing. Testing, testing, testing. Testing, testing. Testing, testing, 一 testing, testing 1 2 3 testing, testing 1 2 3 testing, 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 testing 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8
I rejected blind go, which is seeing
It's a
that.
given. It's a. How did you say it? It's a, just a fact.
Oh, okay.
This. Yes. Okay.
Are you okay?
No, boss.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Okay.
Okay, welcome back for the second session of today. It's my great honor to introduce Professor Urai Satoshi. He holds a PhD in letters from Kyoto University, from which he graduated with a dissertation on Tanabe Hajime's philosophy of religion. He's an assistant professor with the Hakubi Project, the Kyoto University Graduate School of Letters. He's the author of Tanabe Hajime, Social Reality, Salvation and Philosophy, of which I've brought a copy. This is my own copy. I use this a lot. I'm really indebted to Professor Urai for my own Tanabe reading, as you will soon find out. I'll put it in the corner here if you want to have a look after the talk, okay? His research concerns the philosophy of religion, social ontology, and he has proficiencies in Japanese philosophy, Japanese Buddhism, and their histories. He taught on Pure Land Buddhism at Otani University, and as a translator, with, among others, yours truly, he has led production on texts by Nishida Kitaro, Tanabe Hajime, and Kiyozawa Manshi. His talk is titled Tanabe Hajime on Totality and Contradiction. Please give him a warm applause.
Thank you, Dennis, for your kind introduction. I'm very honored to speak at this summer school. I would also like to thank the organizers for inviting me here. So especially since I'm coming not from Japan, but from Estonia, where I'm currently staying as a visiting scholar. I hope my talk will at least justify the flight fee. So the title of my talk is very simple, Tanabe Hajime on Totality and Contradiction. I selected this title because I would like to contribute to this summer school by reconstructing my understanding of Tanabe in English according to the title of this summer school. The theme of totality and contradiction seems to me quite appropriate for discussing the Kyoto school, especially Nishida and Tanabe. This is because one of the central issues in the formation of their philosophies, Nishida's philosophy and Tanabe's philosophy, was how to understand the relation between whole and part, while contradiction stands at the core of their dialectic, though in different ways. I believe that participants in this summer school have already gained a good sense of this through lectures of Greg, Kyle, and Dennis. This talk clarifies what totality and contradiction mean in Tanabe's philosophy. I focus on Tanabe's absolute dialectic around 1930. My argument is that Tanabe reconfigures Hegelian dialectic by placing the mediation of ontological contradictions at its center. Finally, I argue that for Tanabe, the totality of contradictions is the world as absolute actuality, Zettai Genjitsu. This talk consists of 5 sections and aims to clarify what totality and contradiction mean in Tanabe's philosophy. The first 4 sections deal mainly with totality, while the final section turns to contradiction in Tanabe and to the relation between totality and contradiction. I will begin by examining what totality means for Tanabe, focusing on the Japanese term zentai, usually translated as whole or totality, and on the relation between these 2 English terms. I will then consider when and how whole became a central problem for Nishida and Tanabe. Next, I will clarify the notion that Tanabe eventually assigns to the whole, namely absolute nothingness, and distinguish it from Nishida's place of absolute nothingness. Finally, I will show how we can, from the 1930s onward, situate whole totality and contradiction within Tanabe's philosophical framework. So for your reference, let me briefly show a roadmap of Tanabe's philosophy. Compared to Nishida, Tanabe began from a philosophical standpoint that emphasizes pure experience in 1910, just as Nishida did. In his early work, Tanabe tried to construct a philosophical standpoint that would integrate Nishida's philosophy with neo-Kantianism and phenomenology. Around 1929, however, he moved away from his neo-Kantian standpoint and turned toward the dialectic. At the same time, he began to come into conflict with Nishida. Tanabe called the dialectical standpoint he developed at this time absolute dialectic. From 1934 onward, he began to construct the logic of species, a theory of social ontology that applied absolute dialectic to historical society. However, as the Second World War progressed, this standpoint reached an impasse, and Tanabe entered a period of silence about 3 years. In 1944, he developed metanoetics, which extended the logic of species into the field of philosophy of religion. The philosophy of death in his final years can be understood as an extension of this project. It was developed from around 1954 onward in confrontation with Heidegger. In my first book, so Dennis introduced, published in Japanese 2 years ago, I clarified the entire development of Tanabe's philosophy from his early period to the philosophy of death from the standpoint of social ontology. One of my ongoing projects, which will be my second book, is to clarify the collaboration between Nishida and Tanabe from 1910 to the 1920s. Through this, I aim to explain both the process through which the Kyoto School was formed and the cause of their later conflict. Today's talk is also related to this project. In particular, I will focus on Tanabe's development from his early philosophy to absolute dialectic. So section 1, Zentai, Totality, and Whole in Nishida and Tanabe. I would like to begin by looking carefully at the concept in Nishida and Tanabe that can correspond to totality, Zentai. Since Greg is one of the organizers of this summer school, I assume that the Hegelian concept of totalitet in the background. The Japanese term Zentai can be translated not only as totality, but also as whole. For the sake of accuracy, I will examine how Zentai functions in Nishida and Tanabe, while keeping the Hegelian concept in view. To state my conclusion in advance, in the case of Tanabe, I understand the absolute that moves this world as a whole, and everything that constitutes the content of the world as totality. Both Nishida and Tanabe discuss Zentai based on Hegel. When Nishida speaks of Zentai in the inquiry, it is connected with Hegel's concept. And in Hegel, the concept is connected with both totality and whole. In Tanabe's case, it is not entirely clear to what extent Hegel was already presupposed in his early writings. But Tanabe shared many concepts with Nishida in his early period. And when he later presented the concept of absolute nothingness as Zentai, he was relying on Hegel. How then should Nishida's and Tanabe's Zentai be translated into European languages? A clue is provided by European words that Nishida and Tanabe sometimes add to their text. You find that the German term they assign to Zentai is Ganze. This corresponds to whole in English. Therefore, if we follow Nishida's and Tanabe's own texts, Zentai corresponding to their absolute nothingness should be translated as whole, corresponding to Ganze. In this talk, then, I will translate Zentai as absolute nothingness as a whole. Let us look at one passage from each from Nishida and Tanabe, in which they understand Zentai as Ganze. First, in Nishida's case, there is the following passage in a notebook written before the inquiry. Wundt explains mental phenomena entirely in terms of mechanical causality. He identifies psychological elements and explains mental phenomena as a combination of these elements. Yet this is unacceptable. One must always consider das Ganze. Since this is an early notebook, Ganze here, of course, does not yet mean absolute nothingness. Rather, it refers to pure experience, which was Nishida's first principle at that time. Here, Nishida interprets Bunto as trying to explain mental phenomena as a combination of elements. Against this, Nishida tries to begin from pure experience, understood as das Ganze. This is also clear from a passage in the Inquiry, where Nishida says of pure experience as true reality. The whole of the true reality first appears implicitly, and from it, the content develops through differentiation. When that development ends, the whole of the reality is actualized and completed. I'll return to this point in detail in the next section. Next, in Tanabe's case, we find this passage in early essay where he first discussed Hegel. The universal is a concrete whole, and the particular is an abstract part. As thought proceeds from the particular to the universal, it gradually realizes the whole that underlies it. The true is the whole. However, the whole is only the essence completing itself through its own development. This is nothing other than the concept. A dialectic is a process of the development of the concept. This is Tanabe's interpretation of Hegel, Hegel's preface to Phenomenology of Spirit. It contains Tanabe's own interpretation, but I think it can be regarded as a standard Hegelian reading. Here, the universal, the concrete whole, the true, and the concept are linked together. Thus, already in the early Tanabe, we find the idea that the whole is the true. Tanabe here calls the universal the concrete whole, and this idea of the universal as the concrete whole later develops into his idea of absolute nothingness. Accordingly, Tanabe's absolute nothingness corresponds to the concrete whole and the universal in Hegel. Its content is a principle that sets mediation and sublation into operation in Tanabe's absolute dialectic, as indicated by expressions such as the principle of dialectic, Benshō-Homogenti, and the principle of turnover and mediation, tenkan baikai. So here, this tenkai means sublation. To say that it sets mediation and sublation into operation means that from the standpoint of Tanabe's absolute dialectic, changes in the relations among all things in the world occur through absolute nothingness. Absolute nothingness is described also as absolute whole, 絶対的全体, and the transcendent whole, 超越的全体. These expressions allow us to determine the relation between whole and totality in Tanabe. The expression absolute whole indicates that absolute nothingness is the whole outside of which anything exists. In other words, that it is not a partial whole. Everything exists within absolute nothingness and is affected by it. In this respect, absolute nothingness corresponds to the world as a physical whole. Yet, as the expression transcendent whole indicates, it also transcends the content of the world. That is, it exists on a different level from the content of the world. What then is this content of the world? Tanabe's absolute dialectic is characterized by absolute mediation. Absolute mediation means that there is anything unmediated, including even the absolute itself. In other words, in Tanabe, the content of the world forms a single network of mediation. Since it is absolute nothingness that makes the formation of this network of mediation possible, absolute nothingness enters into and works within the relation among things. We may describe the relation between absolute nothingness or the world as a framework and the content of the world in terms of figure and ground. Absolute nothingness or the framework of the world as ground, and the content of the world as figure. Absolute nothingness transcends the figure as transcendent whole. But at the same time, it enters into the figure. In Tanabe, then, the relation between absolute nothingness as ground and the content of the world as figure is neither simply one nor completely separate. To use a phrase Tanabe often employs, figure and ground stands in a dialectical unity of not one, not two, Fuitsu Fuji. Because of this relation, in this talk, I would like to call this network of mediation as figure, totality, and nothing, absolute nothingness as a ground that enters into the figure whole. That said, I do not mean to claim that this understanding of whole and totality in the terms of not one, not two is the correct interpretation of Hegel. Still, in Hegel too, totalität means internally articulated whole. In section 160 of the encyclopedia, Hegel writes, the concept is the totality, since each of the moment is the whole that it is, and each is posited as an undivided unity with it. Here, Hegel explains the concept is totality. This does not mean, however, that the concept is merely the sum of its moments. Rather, each moment of the concept is posited in undivided unity with the concept itself. In other words, each moment is not an isolated element, but it's what it is within the self-articulation of the concept as a whole. In this sense, Hegelian totality and totality as a network of mediation in Tanabe have a similar significance. Next, I will examine how whole became a central problem for Nishida and Tanabe. Nishida and Tanabe began to form a philosophical collaboration in the early 1910s. This was because Tanabe was attracted to Nishida's theory of pure experience in the inquiry. Nishida's famous statement that he wished to explain all things on the basis of pure experience as their sole reality had a strong influence on Tanabe's early thought. Tanabe's work in the 1910s was an attempt to ground the various sciences by using Nishida's concept of pure experience. In this sense, Tanabe shared with Nishida the standpoint that takes pure experience as its point of departure. As we saw in the previous section, Nishida's pure experience proceeds in the opposite direction from what he understands Wundt's standpoint, which begins with the combination of elements. For Nishida, the whole first appears and only then differentiates itself into parts. So the two quotation is what we saw in the previous section. Nishida's pure experience appears as one whole, as reality itself. The differentiation of this whole is a process through which reality becomes actualized and completed. This structure can be described as a movement from an implicit whole to an explicit, differentiated whole. Pure experience is not yet a fully articulated whole, but the whole in its implicit form. Its completion consists in the differentiation through which the whole became explicit. Because of this character of differentiation and development, Nishida later says that in the idea of the self-development of pure experience in the inquiry, the Hegelian idea of the development of the concept was included. In other words, from the standpoint of its relation to Hegel's concept, two features can be identified with in Nishida's pure experience. First, like the concept of Hegel, pure experience is a whole. Second, it shares with the concept the character of developing through itself. What then does it mean to say that pure experience is a whole that differentiates itself? Since this talk is about Tanabe, I'd like to use an example given by Tanabe himself. At the beginning of his first essay on thetic judgment, Tanabe defines pure experience as a state of unity in which there is no distinction at all between the subject and the object. He then writes that the state in which we gaze at the blue sky on a clear spring day is clearly pure experience. In other words, pure experience is the state of being absorbed in the beauty of the blue sky on a fine day. To understand this concept of pure experience, let me give a concrete example. So this picture is the Cape of the Gods, Kamui Misaki in Hokkaido, Japan. So my best place on Earth. So when we see this landscape on a clear day, we first observed in one scene in which sky, cape, and sea appear together. At this moment, consciousness is not yet analyzing the scene into detailed objects. The landscape appears as a single whole. Yet, when we direct our attention to it, this whole gradually becomes differentiated. We distinguish the sky, the sea, the cape, the coastline, the grassland. We can then further distinguish the water of the sea, rocks, seaweed, each blade of the grass, and each grain of sand. If we include what is invisible to the eye, seawater can be divided into salt and water, and air into oxygen and nitrogen. In this way, the landscape that first appears as one whole contains countless parts, and these parts differentiate themselves in accordance with the progress of cognition. This is what Nishida calls the differentiation and the development of pure experience. And it is what is expressed in the passage quoted earlier, beginning of this section and the last section. Pure experience, then, is not something formed by gathering together separate elements from the beginning. Rather, one whole first appears implicitly, and the content contained within it differentiates itself according to its own structure. This self-differentiating character is an important feature of Nishida's pure experience. There is one more important feature of Nishida's pure experience. It is prior to distinction between subject and object. This may sound obvious, actually, but I think this point is often misunderstood. To say that pure experience is prior to the subject-object differentiation, it means that pure experience is not a special experience that I have. In other words, it is not that there is first experiencing I, and that this I then enters a special state called pure experience. Rather, pure experience is that from which the experiencing I itself emerges. Nishida expresses this point at the very beginning of the inquiry. It is not that experience exists because there is an individual, but that an individual exists because there is experience. Therefore, everything, including the subject, emerges from experience, from pure experience. Now, what kind of philosophical project does this standpoint correspond to? 4 years before the publication of the inquiry, he wrote the following letter to DT Suzuki Daisetsu. Previous philosophies have mostly been established on the basis of logic. This is lonely. But I would like to establish mine on the basis of psychology. So this is shinri, so not shinrigaku, science of psychology. But there is no other choice but psychology. Recently, I have found William James' theory of pure experience quite interesting. He is said to be writing a metaphysics, but has it not yet been completed? Nishida wanted to construct his philosophy not on the basis of logic, but on the basis of psychology. In this respect, James' theory of pure experience was of great interest to him. In this sense, for Nishida, a pure experience was not an object of analysis, but a tool for constructing philosophy on a psychological basis. The same motivation can also be found in Tanabe. Nishida's statement that he wished to explain all things on the basis of pure experience as the sole reality became Tanabe's own concern. Tanabe sought to explain all forms of scientific knowledge, including philosophy, based on Nishida's self-developing pure experience. His works in 1910s, Philosophy of Science and Investigation into the Philosophy of Mathematics, do precisely this. For example, in the Investigation into the Philosophy of Mathematics, Tanabe understands the extension of number as the self-development of the determinations of number given through intuition. Nishida's pure experience had served as the basis of the sciences by proceeding from the undifferentiated state of subject and object toward thought and knowledge. Tanabe applies this to the extension of number. In this way, the development of numbers into complex forms from natural numbers, integral numbers, rational numbers, real numbers, complex numbers, and variables, as well as even functions, which express relations among numbers, can also be explained through the self-development of pure experience. Thus, for early Tanabe, pure experience as a whole had crucial significance as the basis for grounding scientific knowledge. Section 3, development of the whole in Tanabe from pure experience to absolute nothingness. So in the previous section, we thought that for the early Nishida and Tanabe, beginning from the whole was important, and that this whole was pure experience. As we also saw in the first section, Tanabe's absolute nothingness is also positioned as whole. We can thus see that in Tanabe's philosophy, the whole consistently functions as a first principle, and that there is a development of the whole from pure experience to absolute nothingness. In this section, I will briefly clarify how pure experience as a whole develops into absolute nothingness in Tanabe's philosophy. In 1914, Tanabe connected Nishida's pure experience with Ricketts' interpretation of consciousness in general. In 1918, he then defined it as what must be recognized from the standpoint of metaphysics as ultimate reality, and what can truly be called from the standpoint of philosophy, and what can truly be called God from the standpoint of philosophy, thereby making it the absolute in his philosophy. This consciousness in general is a prototype of what later became absolute nothingness. Let's see how consciousness in general becomes absolute nothingness. So first, we need to consider what consciousness in general means. Consciousness in general is a concept proposed by Kant, but Tanabe relies mainly on Ricketts' interpretation. This concept appears in Ricketts' objective knowledge within the threefold relation between subject and object. Ricketts differentiates the relation between subject and the object in three ways. First, the relation between our body and mind, and the external world. Second, the relation between our consciousness together with its content and everything that exists independently of it. And third, the relation between consciousness itself, so this is consciousness in general, consciousness itself and the contents of consciousness. Ricketts thus gradually narrows down the ordinary meaning of the subject. What remains in the third case, once all the contents of consciousness have been regarded as object, is consciousness itself distinguished from the contents of consciousness. This is what Ricketts calls consciousness in general. He says the epistemological subject that still remains when the whole content of consciousness is considered as object. For Ricketts, consciousness in general is a true epistemological subject. Tanabe identifies Nishida's pure experience with this consciousness in general by understanding pure experience as a pre-individual and supra-individual subject prior to the ordinary subject. This is the subject as whole prior to the division between subject and object. In this way, by interpreting Ricketts' consciousness in general as a subject prior to the subject-object distinction, Tanabe constructs a neo-Kantian epistemology that takes Nishida's pure experience as its point of departure. Tanabe then develops this consciousness in general connected with pure experience by linking it with Spindelmann's normative consciousness, Fichte's Tathandlung, and Leibniz Gott. In doing so, he turns it into the absolute within his philosophical framework. I have discussed this process in detail in a Japanese paper I published last year. So here I will only summarize the main points related to this talk. So Bindelband understands consciousness in general as normative consciousness. He defines normative consciousness as the idea by which the value of all empirical reality is to be measured. By incorporating this determination from Bindelband into consciousness in general, Tanabe gives consciousness in general the function of being the ground that makes individual values values. In other words, the role of consciousness in general is to serve as a ground that makes positive values values, values such as truth, goodness, and beauty. What becomes important here is Leibniz's view in the monadology that God creates the best possible world. According to Tanabe's reading of Leibniz, God creates by making the choice of the best, and thereby directing the world in a specific direction. And this world is precisely the best possible world. This view leads to the teleological worldview that Tanabe later develops in Kant's teleology. And absolute nothingness also presupposes this feature. Absolute nothingness is the principle of mediation and sublation. At the same time, however, as the absolute, it is also the ground of values that guides the world in better direction. Therefore, Tanabe's absolute nothingness is the principle of turnover and mediation, one that transforms the world for the better through sublation and mediation. Section 4, difference from Nishida's absolute nothingness. So having clarified Tanabe's concept of absolute nothingness, I now turn to its difference from Nishida's place of absolute nothingness. So what then was Nishida's place of absolute nothingness? First, when Nishida speaks of place in the initial form in the 1920s, he means our consciousness, understood as a place where knowledge is established. Nishida distinguishes several levels of knowledge and consciousness and constructs a hierarchy among them. This is what he calls the self-aware system of universals, a phrase that also became the title of his book, published in 1930. The hierarchy of consciousness does not move outside our consciousness. Rather, it moves inward toward its deepest ground. At this deepest level, Nishida said that the bottom of our consciousness opens onto absolute nothingness. This deepest consciousness is what Nishida calls true consciousness, or the true epistemological subject. It is precisely what he calls the place of absolute nothingness, or the place of true nothingness. Nishida regarded this place of absolute nothingness as the fundamental standpoint of knowledge. The relation between knowledge and consciousness in this system is continuous with the project of the inquiry in three respects. First, Nishida once wrote, I would like to establish mind philosophy on the basis of psychology. So this is, again, not science of psychology, but shinri. Since Nishida defines the place of absolute nothingness as true consciousness, we may say that Nishida continued to pursue the project of establishing philosophy based on psychology, though not psychology in the ordinary sense, such as experimental psychology. Second, absolute nothingness is the most fundamental universal. Here, as in the case of pure experience, Nishida has in mind the Hegelian idea of the whole as universal. Third, this standpoint is prior to the distinction between subject and object. Looking back on the development of his own philosophy in 1935, Nishida writes, since the inquiry, my thought has consisted in beginning neither from the subject nor from the object, but from a standpoint, prior to the distinction between subject and object. As examined, pure experience is prior to subject-object distinction. Nishida also says the union of subject and object, or the absence of both subject and object, must mean no other than that place becomes true nothingness. In this sense, the place of absolute nothingness is the dimension prior to the subject-object distinction. Nishida also claim that the individual can be thought at the limit of the differentiation and development of the universal. Tanabe criticized this standpoint as a form of emanationism. If particular facts or form of knowledge are determined through the differentiation and the development of the universal as a whole, then they cannot possess anything other than the content already given in the whole. For this reason, Tanabe breaks with Nishida's standpoint, because the place of absolute nothingness orders and organizes the historical and relative through the differentiation and the development of the universal. I cannot go into this issue in detail today, but what Tanabe saw at stake here was the problem of free will and creativity. For Tanabe, the decisive problem was that in Nishida's philosophy, the place of absolute nothingness had become not merely something sought, but something given. If the absolute is already given in this way, then it can function as a starting point from which everything else is determined. This is the way Tanabe understood Nishida's philosophy. For this reason, he criticized it as a form of emanationism. Against this, Tanabe emphasizes that absolute nothingness is only something sought and never something given. However, this idea did not suddenly appear around 1930 as a rebellion against Nishida. Already in 1918, Tanabe had defined the absolute as something that forever remains the object of approach, yet is never finally reached. In this sense, we may say that the philosophical conflict between Nishida and Tanabe was already latent in the 1910s. But why did Tanabe insist that the absolute must not be given? As we saw in the previous section, consciousness in general is a norm itself. If norm were something given, then we would already, in our given state, realize the value corresponding to that norm. Yet Tanabe repeatedly emphasizes in his early writings that the realization of moral value is not a given fact, but an ideal. For Tanabe, the actually existing self is separated from the norm and realizes value only partially through striving toward the norm. For this reason, the transcendental reality that realizes normative value must not be something given from the outset. This is also clear from the statement that one must feel it to be the human mission to enter into reality with a small self and to contribute to the realization of its ideals of truth, goodness, beauty, and perfection. Thus, for Tanabe, the problem lies in how the self, through its own effort, can bridge the distance between itself and the transcendental whole, a distance that can never be completely overcome. In this respect, it is not clear whether Nishida's standpoint, which begins from pure experience as the whole, can truly reconcile with Tanabe's stance to emphasize the movement from the self toward the whole, or the absolute. This is because in pure experience, the whole appears as not merely something sought, but something given. And the self is determined through the differentiation of pure experience. If this is so, then in order to construct a philosophical standpoint different from the logic of a place, Tanabe had to do two things. First, he had to determine absolute nothingness as something sought without being given. Second, precisely because it is never completely given, he had to secure a new path between the self and absolute nothingness. So this is exactly the task taken up in Hegel's philosophy and the dialectic. Concerning the first point, as mentioned, Tanabe had already defined the absolute in 1918 as something that forever remains the object of approach, yet it is never finally reached. Therefore, with regard to the determination of absolute nothingness as something sought without being given, there was no major change in the transition from consciousness in general to absolute nothingness. Moreover, Tanabe describes the standpoint of absolute dialectic as absolute idealism, and that emphasizes teleological and moral practice toward the whole. Absolute nothingness inherits two features of consciousness in general. First, its character as the absolute that guides the world in a better direction. And second, its normative character. Concerning the second point, individual action replaces pure experience. Absolute nothingness exercises its power of sublation by mediating the change of actual being through practical action, and thereby moves the historical world in a better direction. And absolute nothingness remains as consciousness in general had been, a concept equated with God. Tanabe explains this in the following way. It is that which, in the opposition between relative subject and relative object, is present everywhere as the ground of the development of dynamic relative unity mediated by the negation, while at the same time transcending every relative unity as a transcendent whole that contains within itself that dynamic development. Therefore, it does not exist in the sense in which relative and finite being exists. Nevertheless, in the dynamic development of such beings, it must always be self-aware at their ground. So this is terrible sentence, but it is the Tanabe's Japanese. So absolute nothingness, it is not something that manipulates human beings as puppets, as is often charged against the usual understanding of Hegel's absolute spirit. Rather, absolute nothingness works in individual action. As I argued in section 1, absolute nothingness and the determinate contents of this world stand in a figure-ground relation. Yet the ground does not simply determine the figure. Rather, absolute nothingness works only as a transformation of the figure through individual action, and thereby guides history. In this way, Tanabe seeks to construct a standpoint that avoids emanationism by giving initiative not to the side of the absolute, but to individual action. This intent appears in a passage. By understanding the supreme imperative as a determination of transcendent absolute nothingness, as a command, and yet not as something given by another, but as a command that the self gives it to itself, we can bring about a union of autonomy and purposiveness. As mentioned, Tanabe's absolute nothingness guides the world in a better direction through mediation and sublation triggered by individual action. This action arises when the individual freely chooses the imperative given by the absolute as a purposiveness. Yet the individual always retains the possibility of negating this imperative, that is, the freedom to do evil. In this respect, praxis is the path to the absolute nothingness, but at the same time, because the individual can disobey its command, Tanabe secures a point of contract between the individual and absolute nothingness as something sought without being given in Nishida. This also marks his difference from Hegelian emanationism he criticizes. In this way, Tanabe constructs absolute nothingness as a dialectical principle distinct from Nishida's place of absolute nothingness. In order to avoid any form of emanationism, absolute nothingness is positioned as the whole of norms, yet as one that realizes its working in the world only through individual action. Its principal operations are mediation and sublation. Scholars of Nishida or Hegel may well raise objections to this reading, but in this talk I will limit myself to presenting Tanabe's own intention. Section 5, absolute actuality, totality, and of contradiction. So far, we have examined the content of character of the whole internal web. On this basis, I will now show how whole, totality, and contradiction are related in his absolute dialectic. Tanabe says that the logic of dialectic has the unity of contradictions as its core. In a certain sense, this is a standard understanding of dialectic. Contradiction does not simply remain contradiction, but is sublated and brought into a unity. For the contradiction that is unified here, Tanabe uses the expression contradictory opposition as a dialectical term. He writes that the most fundamental form of opposition ultimately comes down to the contradictory opposition between affirmation and negation. In other words, the relation of opposition between mutually incompatible terms, affirmation and negation, is contradictory opposition, and this is the ultimate form of opposition. In Tanabe's case, contradictory opposition spans both the logical and ontological levels. In the preface to Hegel's Philosophy and Dialectic, Tanabe says the following: the opinion expressed in writing and in conversation by my friends Miki Kiyoshi, Honda Kenzo, and Tosaka Jun concerning my position on dialectic were extremely suggestive for me. Through them, I was taught that it was mistaken to view dialectic from the outset, from the standpoint of logic. And I came to realize that it must be considered from the standpoint of analysis of movement, action, praxis, and being. When Tanabe first began to study dialectic, he approached it from the standpoint of neo-Kantian logicism. However, through the criticism of Miki, Honda, and Tosaka, he came to understand that dialectic had to be considered not merely from the standpoint of logic, but from the standpoint of ontology or practical philosophy. Thus, contradictory opposition should not be understood merely as a contradiction between concepts. It must also be understood as an ontological and practical relation among things. To give two examples from the logic of species, Tanabe speaks of the contradictory opposition between individuals and of social contradictory opposition. The contradictory opposition between individuals in society or between one society and another is an ontological relation of contradictory opposition. What then is the concrete content of this ontological contradictory opposition? Tanabe says that in dialectical opposition, its core consists in the opposition of subjective acts of negation. From this, we can see this opposition is determined by individual action. If the core of ontological contradictory opposition is the opposition of subjective acts of negation, then it can be understood as a contradiction between actions. Clear examples would be conflict between individuals or force oppositions such as war. But what Tanabe has in mind under the unity of contradiction is broader than this. In Tanabe's broader sense, transformation through action is one basic form of the unity of contradiction. For example, I'm now speaking, and if you acquire some knowledge by listening to my talk, then a change occurs in your knowledge. In this case, my talk may function in a small way as a mediator, insofar as it changes the unity of your knowledge. Put differently, one unity, myself, and another unity, yourselves, are transformed through the action of my speaking and your listening. In this way, speaker and listeners are brought into a certain unity. This exchange of force through action is, I think, what Tanabe tries to articulate as contradiction or the unity of contradiction. This is why Tanabe describes such relation as force opposition or dynamical opposition. Concerning such a relation, a phenomenologist, my former mentor, phenomenologist Taguchi Shigeru concretized mediation by focusing on Tanabe's expression, 切ることによってつなぐ to connect by cutting. Oh, sorry. Taguchi says, Tanabe's theory of absolute mediation can be described as a thought that everywhere discerns the creative working of nothingness, which of course, this nothingness means absolute nothingness, which connects by separating. Based on Taguchi's interpretation, I would explain mediation as follows. Things are connected by the power of mediation of absolute nothingness. Absolute nothingness has the power of sublation. And as we have seen, this power is exercised when individual acts. Individual action thus transforms the existing connections among things. In Tanabe's theory of absolute mediation, there is anything that is not mediated. Everything is always within the totality of the network of mediation. And individual action transforms this network mediated by the absolute nothingness. Namely, the individual reconnects by cutting the network of contradictory oppositions. To put this in terms of the theme of this summer school, in Tanabe, the relation between contradiction and totality consists in the fact that individual transforms through action the totality as a network of contradictions. We can now see the relation between the two terms. Contradiction names the dynamical opposition among things. Totality names the network in which these contradictions are mediated. This view also leads to Tanabe's interpretation of actuality. Actuality is the totality of the network of mediation in which absolute nothingness connects the force relations among things. When we take up one step further and consider the relation between actuality as this totality and absolute nothingness as a whole, we arrive at Tanabe's notion of absolute actuality. Tanabe explains absolute actuality with the formula the absolute Sibe actuality and the actuality Sibe, the absolute. So this Shibe is a kind of translation of Sokku invented by American collaborator. So and this Sokku means dialectical unity in Tanabe. So in this case, Zettai and Genjitsu are mutually mediated and unified. So in other words, absolute actuality means that the absolute and actuality stands in a dialectical unity of not one, not two. In terms of the figure-ground relation discussed in section 1, this means that absolute nothingness as a whole and actuality, this means that absolute nothingness as a whole and actuality as totality are united in a relation of not one, not two. Absolute nothingness is what makes mediation and sublation possible in Tanabe's absolute dialectic. At the same time, as we saw in section 3, it is also the ground of positive values that guides the world in better direction. In the action of the individual, absolute nothingness works by cutting and connecting the network of mediation that is totality. In other words, absolute nothingness guides the world in a better direction through transformation of the network of mediation brought about by individual action. This is what Tanabe conceptualizes as absolute actuality, expressed in the formula, the absolute Sibe actuality, and the actuality Sibe, the absolute. Due to structure, actuality can be guided to better direction by absolute nothingness. This remains true even in his later philosophy of religion, such as meta-analytics and the philosophy of death. In the later Tanabe, absolute nothingness comes to be understood in connection with God's love and is called nothingness co-love. This nothingness co-love is presented as that which realizes a network of salvation in the world by saved individuals. This network of salvation is called existential communion. In other words, nothingness co-love guides the world in a better direction by realizing existential communion within it. In this sense, the logic of species and meta-analytics are continuous. Of course, the claim that the world is guided by the absolute in a better direction is a matter of faith. Tanabe himself calls such a faith in the logic of species, faith in absolute good, and in metaethics, simply faith or love of God. In this sense, one of the central claims of Tanabe's philosophy is that each person continues to act in order to improve the world or society on the basis of faith in absolute nothingness. In relation to the theme of this summer school, we may say that whole, totality, and contradiction indicate the ontological structure of this claim. I would like to conclude this talk by introducing a passage in which Tanabe, in the 1930s, expresses this faith in a simple and direct way. For us to be able to live, actuality must be rational. Genjitsu, so this actuality refers to Genjitsu. Actuality must be rational. Even if it is not rational today, it must be capable of being rationalized and must be rational in its essence. I believe that without the conviction that justice will prevail, we cannot live even for a single day. I think this conviction is what sustains our existence. So this is bibliography, and that's it. Thank you for your attention. No?
Thank you, Satoshi, for a talk that was completely in line with the spirit of our summer school. So thank you so much for that. We have half an hour, so let's make good use of it, because I think there are probably some questions, right?
Thank you very much. Urai-san, thank you. ありがとうございます. Very good presentation. And okay, Tanabe-san is totally Tanabean or Tanabeist. So yeah, simply I respect you. And okay, your presentation makes me understand the difference between Tanabe and Nishida, of course. And I would like to make a comment from maybe from another aspect from your point, but about the difference between them. And that is topic of death or perishing, individuals' death or perishing, and correctly speaking, born and death or arising and perishing. And as to Nishida, as we've known for before inquiry into the good, Nishida loses his brother and his wife and his many children. And after that, in inquiry into the good, Nishida considers refers to our death or individual humans' death, especially in chapter 4 of inquiry into the good. Yes. So maybe I think this consideration of death leads Nishida to his middle period philosophy, especially nothingness, because in article Basho, paper Basho, in his Nishida's middle period, Nishida raises a notion of Basho as a notion of Basho of nothingness, absolute nothingness, as a Basho, place of arising and perishing, Shoumetsu, no Basho, born and death, yes. So I think this fact designates that Nishida's Basho cannot be any ground, maybe mukite-teki groundless, because we when we lose my friend or maybe I will be dead, and after that we cannot find anywhere. Yeah, so we can not any substance supporting our eternal being. That's right. Then, but I can not find that point in Tanabe's consideration, especially in his early and middle. Because maybe Tanabe understands Nishida's basho as a kind of ground, and Tanabe criticizes it, but Tanabe even inherits its some kind of teleological ground as nothingness. But I think it's quite different from Nishida's case. So maybe from Nishida, he cannot find any moment of contradiction truly in Tanabe's middle, because a contradiction means relationship of born and death, or arising and perishing. There cannot be mutual interaction between them. Yeah, but maybe Nishida raises a zettai矛盾的自己同一 contradictory self-identity. Yeah. So my question is, how about how Tanabe raises contradiction, especially of born and death, or arising and perishing. Yeah, maybe, and one more point, maybe after middle, Tanabe goes to the philosophy of death, maybe, but I think Tanabe needs a radical changing or turning for that, because I think I cannot find any moment of considering relationship between both and born and death in middle. But I want to know your comment on this topic. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for your question. So the thing is, so for Tanabe, so everything is a kind of philosophical concept. So as his disciple Tsujimura Koichi said, so Tanabe philosophizing everything. So and so maybe your question is rendered as kind of so what is greater death? Daishi is for Tanabe. And
also in vital meaning.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah? Not only in religious meaning, but also in vital or meaning in our life.
Okay. So the great death, as for the great death, Tanabe interpreted as the kind of antinomy in Kant. So in the logic of species, so Tanabe interpret Kant in a dialectical way. So the antinomy of theoretical reason is sublimated to the practical level. So namely from the level of the first critique to the second critique. And at the period of the logic of species, Tanabe thought the turn from theoretical to practical levels sufficient for his explanation of social ontology. So Tanabe employed the concept of greater death, so which Tanabe acquired its knowledge from Nishida's later, actually, in 1910s. And so the Tanabe showed a concept of term of death, shibe, life. So this is the first meaning of death or great death in Tanabe. So in a sense, so Tanabe so utilized Nishida's concept of great death in a dialectical way or a conceptual way. And your comment on the physical level. So when Tanabe's wife died in 1951, so he finally realized there is death. And so Tanabe loved his wife so much, and he was crying every day, I heard. So then finally, so his concept of great death or death had the connotation of physical death, or death of others. Until then, so death is just a concept for Tanabe. And in the philosophy as metaanalytics, so such a Hegelian interpretation of Kant proceeded to from the in the logic of species, theoretical to practical. This is the Tanabe's interpretation, but from the practical to the trans-rational level. So now in the philosophy as metaanalytics, there is 3 layers of reason. And so this third layer is Tanabe added to the logic of species. So this is maybe should be my answer to your question.
So thank you for your talk, and I'm very happy to see that you finally quote Tanabe's lecture on the Bensho Hono Imi.
Yes,
exactly. In the volume 15, it's a very actually a talk really related to the theme of this conference, namely the totality and the contradiction. And towards the end of this talk, Tanabe actually raised a kind of application of this dialectic to our daily life. This time, not our existential experience about life or death, but about politics. So precisely speaking, he believed that this dialectic of the different parties, for example, the party at the time, and also these the parties with a different contradictory political position would actually develop a kind of unity, toitsu. This taitsu will become a kind of toitsu, and then it will be very important for the young men at the time to know that this dialectical movement. But I think this application is rather dangerous because usually if we have to say there is a kind of unity or a kind of organic or he used the word transcendent unity, choice the gina zentai or ku or emptiness way. Use a kind of more like an emptiness approach to see these totality or unity. Then usually the opposite opinion will be absorbed by the majority. And if that is the case, Tanabe's political theory in this sense could be quite consistent to his theory. But as a political thought, it would be rather naive in a certain sense. What will be your follow-up to this, political approach to Tanabe's political philosophy?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for your question. So, yeah, actually, yeah, that's why I wrote naive idealism, right? And so actually, so this naive idealism led the logic of species to impulse. So because actually, this idealism is impossible. So, yeah. But yeah, so for Tanabe, so this is kind of necessary condition to do philosophy. So what so his philosophy, as you know, has a strong tendency to making world better. So it's a kind of as I said to Itabashi Sensei, so Tanabe philosophizing everything, but at the background there is such a naive idealism. So that's my intention to quote here. So, but yeah, actually, it's it always remains ideal, but it's a kind of good stance, I think.
I'd like to ask you about the word contradiction. Oh, it's okay. I'd like to ask you about the word contradiction, or whatever word it is that's being used for this in Japanese, because if the word contradiction, or its translation into German, Widerspruch, can have a number of meanings. So, for example, when it's used by a logician, it tends to mean something different from when it's used. What it means when it's used by a Marxist. Okay, it's not something of the form P and not P. It's conflicting tendencies or opposed interests or something like that. And if you look at the way the word gets used in post-Kantian philosophy, the concept often slides around in Hegel and Marx, for example. Often, I must confess, I think these guys are a bit confused. All right, so my question is about the Japanese discussion. So first of all, what character are you translating as contradiction? And does it bear the same kind of ambiguity as it bears in English or German? And do you think, the third part is, do you think their discussion is confused because of any ambiguity that the term has in Japanese?
So actually, so as for the contradiction, I imagined your question before I leave Estonia. And so contradiction. So actually, Tanabe does not employ the word of矛盾, not so frequently. So he mainly employs opposition, 対立. So, of course, there is a contrary opposition and contradictory opposition. So Tanabe differentiated, but actually, how should I say? Modify Tanabe's context. So according to this summer school. So in that sense, so矛盾is not so the front of Tanabe, but the Tanabe always says 対立, and so let me explain how to establish his absolute dialectic for your question. So Tanabe synthesizes Hegel and Marx, and of course both has this different meaning of contradiction, and Tanabe regarded Hegel's contradiction as a kind of conceptual contradiction. And so from Marx, Tanabe, how should I say? From Marx, Tanabe picked up the opposition between, how should I say, physical powers. And then, so Tanabe, finally uses opposition for such a contradictory situation. So yeah, this is what I can answer for now.
So, just a question about Japanese.
Japanese.
Totality of contradictions. What character in Japanese are you translating as contradiction?
Character. So character, namely, so not nature, but letter.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. So矛盾is a kind of this is lance, the weapon, and shield.
Okay, it's all right.
Where is it?
No, I know the character. It's okay. Is that ambiguous in Japanese?
矛盾対立. Okay, so this is
Yeah. Yeah. No, I understand. Now, is that phrase ambiguous in Japanese?
Ambiguous.
Yeah, ambiguous.
Why ambiguous?
Well, because the word contradiction and its German translation, Widerspruch, is somewhat ambiguous in English and German. And I want to know whether there's a similar ambiguity in Japanese.
In these two characters?
Yeah. So in English, the word contradiction can mean something of the form P and not P. It can mean opposing tendencies. And you find both of those in Hegel, for example.
Yeah, in Japanese, it is.
Yeah, I think in Japanese usage is similar to the Chinese usage,
Yeah, exactly.
which is also mean contradiction and contrary at the same time. So I think, yeah. Yeah, but the word, I think the ambiguity in Japanese is it means both contradiction and contrary at the same time. Yeah, I think it's also can be meeting, yeah. Yeah.
So the Japanese word, can that mean conflicting tendencies, or can it mean P and not P?
Can I jump in just real quick? At least I think the P and not P and the Marxist use of contradiction, they're using this term mujun. So the Marxists are using it to talk about these conflicting tendencies, and yet it's also used in this kind of P and not P sense. So I don't know about the character itself, but it's certainly taken on that dual meaning from its translation, if that helps.
Do they realise that this is ambiguous? Because if you don't, it can be very confusing. You could be talking across purposes.
I think that they are constantly talking across purposes, but that ends up being kind of productive for a lot of the discussions.
So there is maybe you know the famous story about Mujun. So this weapon. Yeah, okay. So then, so why abstract? I'm not sure.
Okay, let me make a little inventory of how many questions we have. I saw one. I know you have, Greg. I know you. And Francesca, you have? Yeah. No. You had to. Yeah. Oh, is it fine for you? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Very quick, directly related. Maybe the ambiguity is not in the word, but in the usage of the word. Like a more everyday usage of the word implies a kind of conflict, but the logical use of the word implies strict contradiction, which is not an opposition, but a contradiction. So it's more the usage than the kanji or the word.
Okay.
Thanks so much. Your talk was very fitting. It fit in very well. I hope the students also picked up on the connections. So I have maybe 3 questions. Sorry, I try to be clear about. My first question is about Nishida, your helpful contrast. I wanted to ask about psychology, because, and the sense that it is used here, because, as you point out, the deepest level of absolute nothingness is this true consciousness, right? And it's connected to God. They're very, very important. And that's there in inquiry and even in the Basho. But Nishida does say later that his philosophy was too psychological. And I think one of the later prefaces to inquiry. So I was just curious, on the one hand, there's continuity, but Nishida also looks back and says it was too psychological. So I was just curious what your thoughts are on this. That's my first question. Maybe that one first, yeah, go ahead.
What's it?
The question is that Nishida, in reflecting upon the inquiry into the good, says that his thinking was too psychological.
Okay.
This is, I think, from the perspective of the Basho theory. So just about your thoughts on this.
Yeah. It's in a certain sense too, but even in the paper of Basho, Nishida says ishiki, the consciousness.
Yes.
So in that sense, yeah.
Okay, so in this sense that it's still, the absolute is still consciousness. And in this sense, it's continuous.
And
Okay, I agree
yeah.
with that, of course. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very helpful. Okay, good. My second question was about related to contradiction, but I won't spend too much time because it seems like in Tanabe there is, on the one hand, the sense of contradiction in the sense of conflict between individuals and society, as you noted. Is there also a logical sense, though? Like when you think about, like in philosophy of metanoetics, absolute nothingness is beyond all relative beings, but when you talk about it, you inevitably make it into a being. So this is part of the reason why you have to go beyond reason, I think, too. Because there is, in fact, a logical contradiction in absolute nothingness.
Yeah.
So I just want to say that maybe that the practical so-called contradiction is not the only one. I just wanted to ask you this.
Yes,
Okay.
we always, yeah.
Okay, good. And just finally, that wonderful comment about having faith in justice. Yeah, I like this. And what I want to say is,
This one?
yes. I also believe this, actually. But my friends tell me I'm just stupidly optimistic. It might be temperament. But I wanted to ask you about this because one thing that's interesting about, because you put naive, but maybe naive, okay. But I was thinking, in philosophy is metanoetics, is this powerful idea that a human being can only be good by the mediation of other power.
Yes, exactly.
So other power is the great compassion that enables us to be good and free, absolutely free. But the radically evil person wants to be good by their own power. But it seems like this person can only realize their ends by relying upon other power, because you're only free insofar as you rely on the absolute. So it seems like for Tanabe, evil can never truly succeed. Radical evil can never truly succeed because radical evil always must rely on this other power, but it always wants to free itself from the other power. So it seems to me that Tanabe has good reason to say radical evil can never win. Because radical evil always requires other power, and therefore they must always lose in the end.
Yeah.
Like Trump must lose in the end.
Yeah, so as
Okay. Sorry, now, I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but I just wanted to try to make it less naive, if possible.
Okay. Yeah, so as for the logical evil, Tanabe connected it to our body, so given by society. So then, as far as we have body, so we always have the tendency to do evil things. So this tendency is the logical evil for Tanabe. So it is inherited in our body. So, but Tanabe believed it is so turned into better direction by the nothingness column. Yeah.
Okay, we have 5 more minutes, so let's make good use of them.
Thank you for the talk. Apologies for the voice, I'm sick. But yeah, I had a question regarding the Tanabean formulation of soku. So it's to me that like a recurring theme in the summer school is that at least in the Nishidian reading, right, we kind of collapse the difference of particulars and universals by using contradictory self-identity, right? So every concept kind of is mediated by its own self-negation. But in the sense of absolute seems absent, and the thing necessarily self-determines itself must be the absolute. but this does not extend, I think, to the domain of the particulars. So I'm curious as to see whether you think that contradictory self-identity is something that you see in Tanabe, or like to what extent it's thoroughgoing and it's pervasive in the dialectic of mediation that you don't see in Nishida.
So your question is contradictory self-identity can find in Tanabe.
Yeah.
So yeah, of course you can examine in that way, but Tanabe himself always deny Nishidian concept. So, but in Tanabe, maybe the problem is self-identity. What self-identity means. So yeah, so it depends on your interpretation of the self-identity or the contradictory, absolute contradiction.
Can I expand on the question a little bit, if that's okay?
Yeah.
So it seems to me that absolute mediation must be contingent on this kind of like strict difference between the particular and the absolute, which I think you don't see in Nishida. So I guess to reframe the question is that how concrete then would the individual be on this side of the dialectic in order for this mediation to occur? Like, do you abandon the strict unity, the collapse of difference that you see in Nishida, strictly speaking, or is there like a very kind of like concrete difference between two things, right? That doesn't necessarily have this thoroughgoing identical sublation, that you get at the end of the dialectic.
Yeah, so it's quite difficult. So the kind of so it maybe relates to the status of logic or the difference between Nishida and Tanabe. So when Nishida talks about logic, so Nishida always consider the relation between the subject and the predicate. And so Tanabe, for Tanabe, logic means not the subject predicate, but of course it can, sometimes it means that, but so Tanabe always thinks of genus, species, and individual. So in that sense, so contradiction itself had some different connotation, I think, between Nishida and Tanabe.
Who still has a short question? Can I ask? Yeah, exactly. Can you, so in Nishida, it seems that the source of our freedom is the absolute, right? We can become one with the absolute, and that's how we gain the power of freedom. What in Tanabe is the source of our freedom, I wonder?
Oh. So, yeah, thank you. So it is also the absolute, but
Greg is relieved.
So, but it is in different way. Tanabe explains the difference between Nishida by using the mathematics, maybe integral and differential. So integral is, as you know, sum of the certain range, but differential means a kind of point of the connection between function and line, right? And so yeah, Tanabe explains it by using neo-Kantian concept, especially Cohen. And of course this is Tanabean view, but for Tanabe, for Nishida, so always free in the union with the absolute, but Tanabe only in a certain point, so the union between individual and the absolute happens. So that's the difference, but of course the structure is the same, but the difference lies in there.
What would be the point where the freedom is possible?
So you're asking about the differential.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not a mathematician, but
me neither. So you can tell me anything. Okay. Well, this is a discussion we will continue during lunch because I definitely don't want to be in between you and some good food, okay? So please, let's thank our speaker, Professor Urai Satoshi, for his presentation. So if you can read Japanese and you're interested in Professor Urai's work, I brought a copy of his book so you can have a quick look at it before you head out for lunch. Thank you, everyone.
The lunch will be held in. Thank you. The lunch will be held in Lee Washington College, and we will all walk together from here, which takes less than a 5 minutes walk. So, yeah, we will gather at the lobby and we will start moving. Thank you.
So nice.
I'm so happy. Me and Greg were looking at each other the whole time. Great. You have an umbrella.
Excuse me, please bring along your umbrella if you have one, because there may be rain at one something. Thank you.